On Monday, April 4th, and I will call to order our board workshop. First up, our attendance. So Ms. Tower is not here yet, but will likely be joining us later. The rest of the board is here, as well as Superintendent Anderson. Then we have our Pledge of Allegiance. So we will stand and do that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so since this is a workshop, we will not be voting on any of the items, and we cannot make adjustments to our agenda. The first thing that we have Terry Morrow from MSBA here to connect with us about open meeting law and conflict of interest and all of that fun stuff. All of us had training, of course, in these things, but it's always good to have a refresher, especially in a context where all of us are together and can ask questions and things like that. So, Terry, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you all. I'm hoping you can hear me okay. Thank you for letting me join you tonight. I thought, Anna, if I might, I've got a couple of topics. You just listed a couple of topics as well. Could I just ask if there's any other topic or question that folks have at the front end that you'd like me to cover as well?
Somewhere in here, I'd like to know what information we as a board are entitled to know through the superintendent that may not be public, and how that can be conveyed.
That's a great question. Absolutely. Sure. Happy to do that. Anything else?
I'll just say, just how emails played a part of communicating with the board members, either board member to board member or superintendent to board member, how that all plays out.
Great. Thank you.
And I'd like to add too, if there are any related concerns with social media accounts, either private groups or public groups.
Fantastic. Thanks, Kirsten. Well, Anna, I'm going to jump in. I have a PowerPoint, but I think we'll start by just chatting. But if we need to turn to it, I certainly can turn to it. But let's kind of jump in on, I'm going to start with conflicts of interest, if that's all right. Conflicts of interest are relatively narrow when you think about them legally, but they can be quite broad when you think about them in terms of public perception of a conflict of interest. The conflicts of interest legally that exist are when you have a direct financial interest in a decision that the school board or a school district can make. So you own a company in town and the school district's looking at doing business with your company, and you're going to financially benefit from that contract. Then there are steps that have to be taken. There has to be an affidavit filed. You have to be the lowest bid or lowest quote. There are steps. So Jim Bryant, you could do business with the school district, but you have to take steps because it is legally a conflict of interest. But the law tells you, Jim, what steps you would take. There's also potential conflict of interest legally when a school district hires a teacher who's related to a school board member. It only affects teachers, and it's only the initial hire of the teacher. So it's not the collective bargaining agreement. It's just the first time a teacher works at a district. And that was my case with my wife, Martha. I was on the St. Peter School Board, and Martha was applying for the first time to work for the St. Peter School Board. I had to vote. It's actually that conflict of interest. The result is that the full board must unanimously vote to hire Martha. So there's a law on that conflict of interest of what to do. The third conflict of interest I would mention is on the collective bargaining agreement, and it could be the teachers, it could be the custodians, it could be food service. If it's a collective bargaining agreement and a board member is married to a member of that unit, that board member must abstain. Those are the three big conflicts of interest when it comes legally, when it comes to being a school board member. So let's if we could go to the other type, Anna, that's that public perception. So the law doesn't say there's a conflict of interest, but you and or your other board members feel this doesn't look good if you vote on this motion. So Arlen, let's say you work for Target and the school district's going to approve a contract with Target. You don't have a direct financial interest. You're not going to get paid more from Target just because the school district buys supplies from Target. But the community may know you work at Target and you think, this doesn't look good. How about I abstain? Districts often allow their members to abstain when they say, yeah, there's a reasonable chance that somebody may feel there's a conflict of interest here. But other than those, school board members are really expected to vote. They're expected to vote. They're allowed to vote. I know, Pam, I'm thinking, like when I was on the school board and we'd have parent-teacher conferences. And I would go to the parent-teacher conference, but of course I'm the school board chair, and I'd have to keep saying, no, I'm just a parent. This is my daughter, Maggie. We have those two positions. I'm going to keep a line separated. Please, teacher, don't worry about me being a board member. It's not a conflict of interest. It keeps me from going to my students' performances or my students' parent-teacher conferences. As long as you as a board member are aware of that potential for power differential and conflict of interest when you are interacting with staff, that's really helpful. And the final thing I'll say, then I'll turn back to you all, is just to keep in mind that as much as I might try as a board member to say, I'm talking as a parent, I'm not talking as a board member. Every time I was in the building, it was as a board member. From the employee's point of view, I signed the checks type of thing. So I had to be very aware of that. So Karsten, I would call you or I would call a principal, say, hey, I'm going to come in the building next week. It's not about anything. Or I might say, hey, I'm interested in seeing the new gymnasium. But I would let them know why I was coming so they didn't feel I was there just to micromanage or administer the building itself. So Anna, I'm going to stop there and see if folks have questions or maybe more specific questions about conflicts of interest and maybe that power differential.
Sure, yeah. Terry, I have a question just about my specific situation. If you could maybe answer that. I work for Red Wing Youth Outreach in town here.
Could you say that? I didn't hear where you worked.
I work for Red Wing Youth Outreach, and the district has not a financial partnership in any way with youth outreach, but there are things that we do together for kids in the community. And so I was just wondering if it ever came to a vote, something came up with youth outreach, if that might be considered a conflict of interest. Like I said, we don't have any financial ties to Red Wing Youth Outreach. But
legally, there'd be no conflict of interest. Those are two separate organizations. You said there's no financial relationship, so you're not renting space from the district, you're not getting funding from the district. This would simply be a public perception question. If people felt you were voting on things not with your board member hat on, but with your employee hat on. But no, I don't. From what you described, I don't see a conflict of interest there.
okay, thank you.
If we're okay on that, maybe, and I'll turn to data. And what data can people get? What I'd like to do is I'm going to just check here. I'd like to see if I could share a screen, so I'm going to do that here. You should be able to see a PowerPoint screen in a moment here.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to just go ahead. I'm sorry, this is going very quickly. Hopefully you see employee data. Okay, perfect. So as a school board member, you're allowed to have some information about your employees. Public data about employees is listed in Minnesota law. So there's some things that any member of the public can learn about your employees. And we're actually, Carson, you've seen this. There are companies out there that write to school districts and say, give me every employee's name, every employee's phone number, every employee's email address. And what they want to do is contact your employees and sell them things. And Karsten, as the superintendent, has to provide that data if it's within the Minnesota law, the listing of public personnel data. So name, title, pay, all these things are public information that anyone in the world can request. That public data, and I put these two on here because sometimes people don't know that public data includes if there's a complaint or charge against an employee, or the final disposition of disciplinary action. That's all public data. Anyone could request that data under Minnesota statute. Now, the data they may get may not be a lot. They may not get a lot of background information, but they can ask for data on these two areas. Anyone in Minnesota, anyone in the world could make that data request. It's among the, I think, 25 types of data you can get about an employee. In addition to public data, there's private personnel data, and this is all covered in our model policy 406. And in policy 406, there's reference to someone called the responsible authority. This is a legal term, and the responsible authority determines who gets access to non-public data. Now, anything that's public, anyone can get. But if it's not public data, so let's say it's private employee data, then the responsible authority makes a decision on whether the person will get this private data. So Karsten, I'm going to assume that you're the responsible authority in Red Wing. Okay, most superintendents are. And Karsten, I'm sure, has a procedure for deciding, okay, who's asking me for this not public data and who do I give it to? And the highlighted language here is the language that you use, that Karsten can use to make that decision. As a school board member, he would determine, does your work assignment as a school board member reasonably require access to the not public data? So there are a few things that, and Carson, I don't want to speak for you. So if you have a different approach to this, let me know. But we do see school board members sometimes going to the superintendent and say, I want to see this employee's file. I want to see their personnel file. I want to see this student's disciplinary record because I keep hearing this student is a problem in class, or I heard that this teacher's been arrested. I want to hear it. I want the records. Carson's got to make a decision whether you as a school board member, in your role as a school board member, does your work assignment mean you need to see this data? I'm going to give a couple of terms that might help here. The difference between aggregated data and disaggregated data. So aggregated data would be all your employees. So 42% of your employees do X. You don't know any one employee would either be in that class or out of that class. Disaggregated data means you can tell which individual this data applies to. So if they say you've got 90% of African-American students failed the test, or English language learners, or fourth graders, whatever group you want to say. But if that group is small enough and it's a huge percentage, then you're kind of getting data about individuals, even though it's not being provided. Does that make sense? The names aren't being provided, but the percentages are so large or the numbers so low that it's essentially disaggregated data. So Carson's got to make a decision if a school board member comes and says, I want to see this personnel file, I want to see this data, I want to see these student records. I would recommend, in most cases, unless it's really, really clear, that a superintendent go back to the board and say, do you believe I should release this? Do you believe this information is part of the work assignment that you as a school board understand that your school board members should be engaged in? Does that make sense? In some ways, I think the superintendent could ask the board, do you believe this is part of your job to see this data? But the superintendent legally can make that call on his own or her own. Absolutely. So let me see if there are any questions about employee data and what you can have access to.
I have a question, Terry. I think sometimes it gets really complicated, this reasonable access, because, we are agreeing to hire or terminate people on our consent agenda, and we don't really have the background information. And so I think that, an argument can be made that it would be part of our job assignment to know at least why somebody is being fired for, so what do you do in that situation? I mean, I'm trusting that our administration is putting that on the consent agenda for a reason. How much do we get in the weeds about what those reasons are? Is it necessary? Is it not necessary? How much should we know? Because otherwise we go by public perception, we go by rumors in the community. We don't really know all of the things going on, and so we only get bits and pieces, and people are upset, especially in a termination situation. So I think sometimes we get caught not knowing what to do in those situations.
Pam, that's a fantastic question. I was chair, I'm a Nicollet County Commissioner right now. I was chair last year, and we had publicly known employee issues. And I couldn't say much to the public because I didn't want to risk violating the individual's privacy. I didn't want to make the county or me legally liable for disclosing something. So I would have to choose in some ways, what do I need to know and what don't I need to know? But in addition, it's important to sustain as best you can the ability of the administration to hire, to mentor, to terminate. But you're right, Pam, the ultimate decision comes to you. So I'm not saying you shouldn't know anything. I would just want to be careful to only give me information I need to know, because if you give me something I don't need to know and I release it by mistake, that could be a problem. So what can you, if it's on the consent agenda, Pam, I'm going to suggest a few things. One, you can always call the superintendent and say, hey, I see this is on there. I don't want to get into this in public meeting, but can you just give me a sense, is there what's going on here? And often it's important, and I know when I've been chair, Pam, I've always said to the superintendent, I don't want to be blindsided in aisle 5 of the grocery store about why the district did something. I need at least enough information where I can be comfortable and say, I can't tell you more. I am aware of the situation. I believe we've reached the right decision, but I really can't tell you more. You'd like at least that, I assume. And so you can see on the slide here, it is public data, what happens with a disciplinary action. So if someone's fired for a disciplinary action, anyone could know it. I could know it even though I don't live in Red Wing. So I think this is an opportunity, Pam, to talk with your superintendent, to talk with you as a board and say, okay, how are we going to get information about consent agenda items so I feel at least reasonably assured that everything was done properly, decisions were appropriate, and we can move on without having to have that conversation in an open board meeting, because it's so fraught with the potential of saying something you wish you hadn't said. So I think it's any kind of consent agenda item. What we've always said is board members should feel free to contact the superintendent and just say, what is this item about? And that's why in our model policy, the agenda is supposed to go out X number of days before the meeting. You'll see that in our model policy. You as a board in Red Wing, you get to choose how many days ahead of time you want the agenda. But that's intended in part so that you can ask questions of Carson to say, I see this person's being terminated, or I see this person's leaving the district. Can you just give me a little bit so I understand and I'm doing my due diligence so that when I get stopped at the grocery store, I can say to folks, I know about this situation. I am informed. I can't share everything I know, but I am aware of what's going on. Pam, what do you think of that approach?
I like that a lot, but as a follow-up, then what if 6 of us contact Karsten with that same question? Is that a serial meeting then, or how is that? No, that's okay if he answers the same question 6 times in 6 different ways?
Yes, that's okay. The serial meeting would come up, and I'm assuming everyone I can see is a board member other than Karsten. So if I throw you in, I got it wrong. But Pam, if you were to call up Karsten and get information and then tell Arlen, and then Arlen emails Jim, and Jim calls Anna, even that sharing of information is not an open meeting law problem. The problem is when you start discussing and making decisions by email. So the problem would be, Pam, in a situation such as, I think we should vote no on adding a 5th grade class, or whatever you want to say. I think we should vote no on building a new gym. And you call Arlen. And Arlen says, oh yeah, Jim and I already had this discussion. We agree with you. And then you email Anna and you say, hey, the 3 of us think this is wrong. We shouldn't build a gym. And then Anna says, well, I don't know. Let me check in. That now you're having a serial meeting. You're discussing a matter of school district business. It ends up being a quorum once you count up all the people who've been involved, even though you weren't all involved in the same time period conversation. You weren't all talking together. Karsten can share information, and you can share information with individual board members. You can share information. You can't decide and deliberate. And Karsten, I understand you probably don't want to send out, hey, we're getting rid of this employee because of X reason. Only because you just want to be careful because you never know where email is going to go. So yes, Pam, every board member could call Karsten individually and say, what's this about? Or Karsten could let the chair know, hey, look, this item's on the consent agenda. Here's what's going on. And then you all could call the chair and ask that question too. Karsten, I don't know how it's been working, and I may have it wrong in your district. I don't want to step on your toes.
No, I think your advice is really good. And one thing that I'm kind of torn on it, because if I share information with one board member, I feel like everyone should have access to the same information. Maybe there's some exceptions for the chair, but I like what you're describing. So it sounds like, for example, with the termination, I could send an email out to all board members with a brief description, although there's risk with that because somebody could press forward, even by mistake. Or people could call me with questions about why, or it sounds like I could, contact Anna in this case as the board chair, and then, information could be shared that way.
And that's often what I did as chair, and I'm saying Pam, but for all of you, is I would get the information from the superintendent, and then I would contact each board member and say, hey, look, you're going to see this on the agenda. If you have more questions, that's fine, but here's what this item is about. Because honestly, I hate that feeling. I don't feel that you're doing your job as a representative of the people if you can't tell the people what's going on when they ask you, up to the limits of you can't give them private information.
And if I were a board member, I would be distraught if I was at the grocery store and somebody said, well, why are you firing this person? And, the board member hasn't heard about it. So I get where board members are coming from as far as being surprised.
And I'll tell you, so Carson, I don't know if you know Jeff Olson. Jeff Olson was the superintendent here when I was the board chair. And we had the agreement, we used the grocery store, we had the agreement. He wouldn't get blindsided in a meeting from me. I would tell him, hey, I'm coming to the meeting. I'm mad about this. I just want you to know it because I'm going to bring it up rather than blindside him. And I tell him, I don't want to be blindsided when I'm out and about in St. Peter. So we'll share with each other. Doesn't mean we have to agree, but we're not going to kind of do gotcha.
Kind of a related issue. There are lots of things happening here all the time, just like any school district. So if I'm giving updates to all board members via email and it doesn't include non-public information, what do most school districts do? Is that commonplace, or or should it also be shared with the public at the next board meeting? What do you suggest?
No. So just now, Carson, I got an email as we've been speaking from the Nicollet County Administrator recapping last week. Just an informational, hey, here's what's going on in Nicollet County. And Carson, and maybe you're talking about this, a lot of superintendents will do, say, a Friday or a Monday email to the board saying, here's what's coming up this week, or here's what happened this week. And they just make it a regular communication. You're right, Carson, your emails to the board would be discoverable in a public data request because you're talking about school district business. So you do have to be somewhat careful in those emails because I, as the Red Wing newspaper, could come in and say, Carson, I want to see all your emails to the board for the last year. So you have to be careful in those reports. But Carson, I do think it's a common practice for superintendents to share information by email. It does not violate the open meeting law as long as the board doesn't start discussing it in email. So your email, Carson's perfectly fine. And so what school districts will often do, Carson and others, they'll put the board members' email addresses in the BCC, the blind copy. Just so if you happen to hit reply, it's only going to Karsten. So if you make a mistake and hit reply or reply all, it's just a way to avoid having a discussion. But yeah, Carson, I think a lot of your peers are sharing information weekly by email, and that's not an open meeting law problem. It's when you start deliberating or discussing.
And as far as transparency, I could easily do that, but then just attach it to the administrative reports that we share with the public so that there is full transparency that way.
Yeah, you could do that. You could do that. Anna, where would you like to go next? I've got closed meetings. I think we've covered emails. I've got social media.
Yeah, let's go into that. I think
All right.
let's.
I'm going to go first to closed meetings. And Anna, I think earlier today, I sent somebody a chart.
Yes.
I don't know if you all have this from MMCA, but it's a two-sided chart on when you must close a meeting and when you may close a meeting. And Carson, I think you've gotten this before from me as well. We're happy to send it to all of you. So Anna, if you want to share it with the group, that's certainly fine. Karsten, if you don't have it, just shoot me an email. I would keep this chart wherever you have your board meetings. Just keep it there for each board member in case any questions come up about what are we doing in this closing meeting. So if I could just give a few points, you cannot close a meeting just because the information is sensitive or delicate or could be controversial. That's not a grounds for closing a meeting. To close a meeting, and Anna, are you chair right now?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a set of blue boxes on this chart. Anna would have to read from the blue box. Essentially, she has to say, why are you closing the meeting? Excuse me here. And what are you going to be discussing? So, for example, we were talking about dismissal, termination of an employee. If you are going to terminate a licensed teacher, you must go into closed meeting under Minnesota Statute 122A.40. So Anna would say, we're going to go into closed meeting for the purpose of discussing termination of a licensed teacher pursuant to Minnesota statutes 122A.40. At that point, everyone leaves the room except for the board, superintendent. There could be another employee there, maybe making sure that the recording is being kept, etc. But that's the process for going into closed meeting. So when must you close a meeting? There, as I said, there are 4 cases where you must close a meeting. First is if you're discussing certain data. So for example, if you're going to be discussing a sexual assault situation, you can't do that in open meeting. You have to be in closed meeting to discuss the types of abuse listed here. Maybe there's a criminal investigation going on concerning the school or students. You can't talk about that investigation data in open meeting. You must do it in closed meeting, which makes sense. If you did it in an open meeting, then the people being investigated would know what's going on. You can't talk about a kid's educational data, their grades, their academic performance, their test scores. Can't talk about that in open meeting. Health data, medical records. That's all. These are all the types of data you cannot talk about in an open meeting. Now, Carson's going to know that. A superintendent's going to know, hey, he's good. And that's why, I don't know, Anna, if you do this, I'd like to have the superintendent sitting next to the chair so that superintendent can lean over and say, you need to stop this conversation. You're about to go into data that we can only talk about in closed meeting. All right. The second type of data that has to be closed, or second type of meeting that has to be closed, is talking about preliminary considerations of allegations or charges against an employee. And this has come up twice with 2 school districts today. 2 school boards are going to close meeting tonight for this purpose. And the reason that has to be, and it's any employee, the reason it has to be closed is because you as a board might determine there's nothing here. There's no reason for this allegation. If you do it in an open meeting, you've brought that person's name out to the public, and then you decide, but there's nothing wrong. Yeah, but that person still has some kind of smear against them. So if you're going to talk about allegations or charges against an employee, that must be in closed meeting. I mentioned earlier, firing a licensed teacher requires a closed meeting. And finally, expelling a student requires a closed meeting. In the student case, in the teacher case, in the charges case, the individual can say to you, I want you to talk about it in an open meeting. So if you're going to be terminating a teacher and the teacher says, I want this hearing in public, then you have to do it in public. If the student's parents say, I want you to do the expulsion hearing in public, you have to do it in public. But those are the 4 situations: data, preliminary charges, teacher termination, student expulsion. Those are the 4 times a school board must go into closed meeting.
So just for clarification, so let's say there is an incident involving multiple students and both students were potentially going to be expelled. At that point, if that was during the same meeting, both sets of parents would have to agree, right? Because if one, or you know what I'm saying? Like, we couldn't talk about 2 students and only one student says, yes, I want my hearing in public.
Yeah, and I think you'd be having 2 different expulsion hearings.
But if the situation that was leading to it involved, 2 students, like, we can't necessarily talk about that.
You can't, this is a much longer question, Anna, about data and redaction of data and the like, but generally speaking, if you had 2 students and both were going to be expelled, you would have 2 different hearings, one for student A, one for student B. If student B wants theirs in open meeting, it's going to be an open meeting unless, Karsten, you know differently.
No, that's my understanding too.
But just with the information about student A redacted.
Exactly. You'd have to, you'd be at least trying to not give information in the open hearing. So you might say student A. Now, the community is going to know who student A is. I know that, but legally, you'd probably refer to that person as student A. There are 5 times when you may, it's your choice as a board whether to close a meeting. Labor negotiation strategy. So Jim, if I could ask you, Jim Bryant, do you have a negotiations committee for your board?
Yes.
Are you on it?
No.
All right. Who here is on the negotiations committee? Okay, Pam, Anna. So Pam, are you still in negotiations or did you just successfully complete them?
Oh, no, we're still going strong.
Okay. So Pam and Anna, the board committee cannot close a committee meeting. So they can't talk in private as a committee. Now, some lawyers will give you different advice, and I'm going to say, follow your lawyer's advice. So if your lawyer tells you your negotiations committee can meet in private, please, please, please follow your lawyer's advice. But for the whole board to get an update about what's going on in labor negotiations, so if Pam and Anna want to report to Jim and Arlen and others what's going on with the board, with the negotiations, excuse me, you go into, you meet as a board and you go into closed session for labor negotiation strategy. Keep in mind with this one, you have to record it and the unions can listen to the recordings after all the negotiations are over. So you just want to be a little bit careful, even though it's a closed meeting. You can close a meeting to do employee evaluation. Let me get by this one. That's that one. You may close a meeting to evaluate an employee. You only are evaluating one employee. That's your superintendent. So this is the superintendent evaluation. You go into closed meeting. And Anna, you as chair would say, we're going to close meeting for the purpose of evaluating the superintendent. You go into closed meeting. The superintendent can say, I want you to do it in an open meeting. And we have seen that. We've seen that sometimes when there's large disagreement between the board and the superintendent. Sometimes the superintendent has said, let's have this conversation publicly. Regardless, at the next meeting, whatever the next meeting is, Anna, you would end up summarizing the evaluation. That's what this last entry says on this slide. So that's superintendent evaluation. That's the only employee you evaluate. If your attorney says we need to close the meeting so we can talk about legal issues, you listen to your attorney. So you may close the meeting basically for attorney-client privilege. It's a little more narrow than that, but follow your lawyer's advice. You can close a meeting on attorney-client privilege. You can close a meeting if you're going to buy or sell property. This isn't just land. This could be big school bus. It could be anything. You may close a meeting so you can talk about how much you're going to ask for or how much you're willing to pay. These are all things that you wouldn't want to talk about in public because then the buyer or seller knows, hey, Red Wing's willing to pay up $3 million. That's now the minimum price for that land you wanted. So that's why you can discuss property sale or purchase in a closed meeting. Now, if you decide to buy the property, you're going to have to do that in open meeting. And then finally, security issues. You as a board can choose to close a meeting to get a security audit. Maybe you've got security concerns, cybersecurity concerns. More and more boards want to get updates on, hey, where are we when it comes to cybersecurity in our district? You can have that discussion in a closed meeting because otherwise you're telling the world where your gaps are, where your weaknesses are. So you can have those discussions in a closed meeting. But if you're going to buy something related to security, that purchase decision needs to be made in open meeting. So those are the 4 types of closed meetings and 5 types of meetings that you may choose to close. So let me stop there, see if there are any questions or observations about closed meetings. Looks like we're good. Okay. Closed meetings have to be recorded. The public is going to be able to hear many of these recordings if they choose to. So just keep in mind, there's no recording of the attorney-client meetings, just no recording at all. Social media, I think we touched on social media at the beginning, Anna. I think someone mentioned social media. And that's really interesting because we've had a lot of discussion here at MSBA today about this. Let me first, it's not about this, but let me first start about school social media. Anything that the school district posts on social media is a public record, and it needs to be maintained. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do because I can't guarantee if your district, if Red Wing is posting things on Facebook, for example, someone could make a data request saying, I want to see all your Facebook postings about COVID or about athletics. Facebook is not maintaining your data for you. And there's no obligation by Facebook to maintain it. Facebook doesn't have an obligation to maintain a school district's public records or Twitter or the like. And this is true for any employee. If any employee has got their own Facebook page or Twitter account or Instagram, and they're putting school district stuff on it, it is possible that someone could come in and say, I would like that data. I'd like to see the postings that the 4th grade teachers put on Instagram. So we were talking about this today because there are more and more companies now who are contracting with government bodies, counties, cities, school districts, saying they will maintain your social media records. It's just something to think of. Carson, it's another, if I turn to you because you're a superintendent, you're going to be ultimately need to make decisions. But the more social media outlets the school district has, the bigger headache the school district has.
So, Robertson.
Go ahead, Carson.
Yeah, our communications manager is using such a program. I'm not exactly sure what sites are being monitored, but that was one of the first things she brought to the district when she joined us.
Carson, that's it's kind of like the Brave New World. As someone here, as Gary Lee said to me today, Carson, oh, good, another way to spend dollars outside the classroom. Yeah, that's right. I would mention to you all as we're on social media that anything let's start with your texts. If you do texting about school district business, the content of those texts are public record that would be discoverable. So I'd be really careful before texting on school district matters, because someone could say, I want to see all Terry's texts that have the word mask in it, or I want to see every text that Terry Morrow, school board member, did about the pandemic. I think I don't know if you followed in Rochester, but Rochester got a huge data request. We want every email, voicemail, text message, and I think there's about 27 different topics. So please keep in mind your text messages as a board member could become a government record that needs to be produced if requested. I know that's not social media, but since we were talking about saving social media, I just thought I'd mention the saving of texts. In terms of social media, you're allowed to post on your Facebook page. So, Pam, you could post on your Facebook page, the yay for the basketball team, whatever. Go team, go. You can do that. And Jim and the whole board could read your post. That doesn't violate open meeting law because you're not making any decisions about anything. But Pam, if you were to post something like, I think we shouldn't do a referendum, and I get on there and I'm a board member and I say, I think we should, and then Jim gets on and he offers his 2 cents, it's still not going to be an open meeting law violation because you're doing it openly. You're doing it on social media. But here are the hangups. And Pam, I don't mean to be picking on you. I have no idea whether you're on social media or not. But if Pam's talking about this and we're all chiming in on social media, but Pam has blocked people from her Facebook account, now it's not necessarily an open meeting because certain people are being blocked from seeing this public conversation. This is why I do not think board members should comment on other board members' social media. Because it may be that I, Terry, have blocked people from accessing mine. And the courts have been fairly clear. If you're an elected public official, you cannot block people from seeing the things you say about public issues. That makes sense? It's not an open meeting law violation, but it could become one if you're blocking people. Serial meeting we talked about, and we talked about the types of information. Karsten, as superintendent, or other employees can send you information all the time. Just don't reply or start talking about it on email. Just take the email and move on. Read the email and move on. Email can be used for scheduling and distributing information. That's absolutely fine. That's perfectly fine. That's probably what you're doing. Email and privacy. Minnesota is a one-party state, and what that means is if I send an email to Arlen and Arlen decides he wants to put that email on Facebook, I cannot legally stop him. He can consent. It's a one-party consent. So if there are two people talking, only one person has to consent to making that conversation public. So if you're talking with a constituent, if you're emailing with a constituent, and that constituent decides to put your email on Twitter, you have no legal recourse. Now, there are some very limited exceptions about confidential information or agreements to be confidential or non-disclosure agreements. But generally speaking, anything you email to a constituent, they can put in the newspaper as a letter to the editor. We are a one-party state, so there's no privacy there if the individual wishes to make it public. Now, you can do the same thing to the individual. I wouldn't recommend it. If a parent writes to you, I would not take that parent's email and put it on your Facebook account. But to make the concept clear, legally you could, as long as it doesn't have non-public information like educational data.
Say, Terry, could you go back 2 slides just real quickly? There, at the very bottom, information emailed to board members in prep for a meeting should be made available to the public. When it says information emailed to board members, does that mean from a superintendent? Does it mean from a principal? Does it mean from a community member? What's the scope of that?
So, Karsten, how do you distribute your board packet for the meetings?
We use Board Book.
Okay, so if the public wanted access to everything you have on Board Book, they have to be given, it has to be included in the materials at the meeting. So you basically print out one copy of Board Book. So if a principal has a report that you distributed as part of the packet in Board Book, that principal report should be in the back of the room. We still legally have to have one printed copy of the Board Book in the room.
So it does not include like an email that may have been sent a week before the agenda packet?
It's called the meeting materials. So I think what you're putting in Board Book are your meeting materials.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's great relief.
And Lisa, you said items listed as extra. You know, I don't know what that means, but what I would say is that if the extras are in the Board Book materials, I would have the printed copy in the room. Were there other questions on this one? I think, okay, so let's go here. Hopefully, I think you all are using school district email. And Ann Robertson, I'll come back to you in 1 second. Please, 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 school board members, use school district email for school district matters. Because the district needs to keep your emails in case there's a data request. And you don't want to go through your Gmail. And those requests could happen 10 years from now. So I'm off the board. I've moved to Hilton Head, South Carolina, and now Karsten's calling me and say, hey, we need all your emails that mention the word mask. If it was on Red Wing email, I'd say, go ahead, Karsten, you've got my email. But if it's on my Gmail account, now I've got to produce it. And even worse, it is possible that a court would order an independent investigator to go through my Gmail to see what emails I have. So please, I'm glad that you're all using Red Wing School District email for all your school district business. If a constituent writes to your private email, I would forward it to your Red Wing Public Schools email and then respond. Anne, you mentioned something about social media.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just had a quick question. What are you recommending districts do to limit, or are you recommending they limit the number of Facebook pages? For example, some districts I've been researching have one activities email. Do not have a Facebook page for the softball and not a Facebook page for the girls hockey and boys basketball, where there's one after another using school district email. That makes it a kind of an official account. I'm just wondering if you have a model policy you could share with Carson that we could narrow it down. So
yeah, we don't have, Anne, we don't have a model policy on this question. What I'm learning more and more about, Anne, is that school districts are being strongly encouraged to limit the number of social media accounts that are district accounts. And I'm trying to separate that from booster accounts. So if the girls basketball team wants a Facebook page, then get a couple of parents to run it and do it, or get a booster club to run it and do it. That doesn't mean they can't share what you all post, but it's just one less account that something bad can happen on. So in terms of maintaining records, fewer social media accounts that are school district owned, if you will, the better. And please keep it in mind, Anne, and this is, it's an unfortunate world we live in. You can have some terrible things said in the comment area of Facebook. And the more social media accounts the district has, the more opportunities there could be racist, sexist, just terrible things in the comment section, but it's under the Red Wing basketball team Facebook. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, because you want to be able to celebrate your kids. I think you should celebrate your kids, but no matter how many accounts you have, Ann, your district needs to monitor every day, several times a day, what's going on these accounts. And the more accounts you have, it's just a more opportunity for problems. What do you think, Ann?
Thank you. No, I agree with you. I mean, I would just assume we have 4 or whatever and call it a day, but thanks. I will work on that, Carson.
All right. Yeah, the fewer the better. It's just easier to manage. Carson, were you about to say something?
No, I just thanked Ann for taking that one on.
All right. All right. So, Anna, were there other topics that we were going to discuss that I haven't touched on? Or anybody?
I think you covered them. Anybody have questions, comments, concerns, thoughts?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, go ahead.
this is Arlen. I got one question. What happens if somebody asks for some information that I may or may not have had on my personal email about school 5 years from now and I've deleted it already?
Well, you shrug and you say you're sorry. You know, you can only produce, Arlen, the data that you have.
We don't have to continue to hold on to our emails. We can actually clean them out if we take the time.
As a lawyer, I can't say you can create an 18-minute gap in your email account. What you could do, Arlen, though, to be serious, is you could send them to your school district email account. So if you, rather than tossing them, if you wanted to clean out your Gmail, you could just forward them to your Red Wing account, and now they're saved.
Are they saved? I can delete my emails on my Red Wing school district site. No, you can't.
No. Arlen, please.
I didn't think I deleted them. Is that right?
What's that?
We have it for one, no, you can never delete it, we have it in our backup.
You have it, but I don't have it.
Yep.
It
Yeah,
exists
thank you.
somewhere in the ether.
Yeah, if you want to clean out your own Gmail account, you can do that by just forwarding those emails to your Red Wing Public Schools account. And now they're somewhere in your server system or the cloud or somewhere. And then you don't have to keep them on your Gmail. Jim, any other topics we should touch on?
I just like I'm not a Facebook person. You probably tell I'm not that generation. However, people tell me about things on Facebook. People got to keep in mind what's on Facebook is always going to be on Facebook. So I always have warned people in elected positions and my other positions I've held, careful what you email, careful what you post on Facebook, because it follows you forever or forever long as it, whatever. So be careful. That's all I say. Just be careful.
Amen and hallelujah, Jim. Absolutely right. You know, that's why I suggested earlier, having individuals who aren't associated with the school doing Facebook pages for the drama club or the one act play, those type of things, great. And school districts just should really have an employee whose responsibility it is to make sure that things aren't going amiss. And just try to stay onto the celebratory type of messages, the school closing type of messages, or really informational messages, and really try not to be partisan in any form, because that's one place where you can have a problem as well. Pam, is there anything else that we could touch on tonight?
No, I think you've answered my questions, Terry. Thank you for being here tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I know I'm missing a couple of board members because I can't see everybody. So if you're a board member and you don't have your camera on, is there anything else we could touch on?
No, thank you, Terry.
All right, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and explaining all of this and allowing us to ask the questions and all of that. I appreciate it. I think we all do.
Well,
Thanks,
it's been
Terry.
my pleasure. Thank you for having me join you. Let me just give you, my email address is at the bottom of this slide. And I think you all have my cell phone number. My cell phone is 507-327-8226. And I just got a text from a board that's meeting at 6 o'clock. So I probably should go, Anna, and see what that text is about. All right.
Sounds
Thank you.
good.
Let me join you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. So next on our agenda, our educational planning update. So Superintendent Anderson, I will let you.
Yeah, I'll make this real quick
Yeah.
because we could discuss this in 2 weeks and there are some other items, but
Okay.
just to give an update, we did issue the RFP that's included in the workshop packet. We received 4 proposals for educational planning. 3 of them were within the $50,000 limit that I had expressed to interested parties. So we interviewed those 3, but not the 4th, and all very different proposals. The one question I have is whether we should do it now or if we should wait until the fall. And I think it's largely because, a lot of our employees and families, quite frankly, it's been a long couple of years, especially this year. So I'm not sure what kind of engagement we would have if we did it now. We're willing to do it. We could bring forward, one of the firms and get started right away. But we're wondering if perhaps we should wait. And so we're just looking for your feedback as far as what our next step should be. Do you have a preference one way or the other?
Well, I know one of the things that, we talked about when we were talking about the school configurations is the desire to have 5th grade at the elementary and 8th grade at the middle school, but how do we make it work and how does all of that happen? And if that would be part of the purview of this or anything else that would be taking place in that next school year, is fall too late? You know what I mean? Because it's going to take time to get through that process, that, if this firm were to find things that we would want to make changes for the 23-24 school year, do we need that information before like January of next year? You know what I mean? In which case I would want them to start sooner. That's my
Answer
thought,
question
but-
is, yes. If we were gonna do another change in 23-24, then we should get started now.
Okay.
Yeah, no question about it. Then the question becomes, would we want another big change right away? Maybe yes, maybe no.
I think we can't make that unless we have the information.
So what's the timeframes in the proposals?
I'd have to look through each proposal, but we were anticipating 4 to 6 months. So if we started, let's say in May, we could be done in November-ish.
So help me remember what this educational planner is really gonna be focusing on. Is it, I thought it was about, schools and configurations and busing and all of those pieces, long-range planning. That's it.
That's a big part of it. And then also, it'd be collecting feedback from students, parents and community members as far as how we could or should change our educational plan. So even if we left all the facility, if we left everything the same, we could still have a robust discussion about, do we want to change our instructional model? Do we want to relook at how we run a middle school or elementary school curriculum, those kinds of things. So it's sort of encompassing all of those potential areas.
So does it make sense to do this now before we get into the referendum, to have this information or to tie it in with that?
Potentially, although my gut feel is that I'm not sure how that would change the dollar amount that we're asking for. It could change, the content of the educational plan and our promises. Sorry about this. I've got to learn to turn off my microphone.
I'm thinking more public perception, and because this whole process involves, as you said, talking to the public, talking to our staff, getting a lot of feedback from people in our community, and would that help moving forward with the referendum?
Possibly, or it could confuse the issue. So, and I'm not saying that we would consider adding on 3 classrooms to any building, okay? I'm not suggesting that. But if that was the result of a discussion because we really want a 6-8 middle school, then that could confuse our messaging going into November. Because people might assume that that's part of the referendum when it may or may not be.
I say we start the fall. They're starting, let's go forward.
Like in September,
Yeah.
around there.
School start August, I started earlier.
Well, if it's meeting with staff or people who, well, I know the staff has more time in the summer, depending on your situation, but does it make more sense for the district for it to be in the summer versus the fall when it may be less busy, or maybe it's more busy depending on, or difficult to reach people? If the goal is to talk to teachers who are not in the building, maybe summer is a terrible time. But I think I would want to know, when do the planners think that it should happen, based on what they would want to do. I think sooner than later, but
It could cost us money though. To ask teachers to come in.
if we were asking for them to come in the summer or something like that, yeah. Did you have something?
Yeah, I want to be careful not to say what we should do here in the workshop setting, because we are not to make any decisions here. Personally, I favor the concept of getting on this sooner than later. We've been kicking this can down the road. If we would have had it maybe a year ago, maybe we would have had another way of doing things different for next year in the 6-8 configuration, maybe not. I don't have the answers, but I'm hoping that this whole thing, if we're gonna do it, is gonna give us some answers or recommendations on where to go. And continue pushing it off just isn't, to me, doesn't seem right. So I would hope that we would have this come back to a board meeting, our next board meeting, to make a decision. And I would hope that maybe you would check with the proposals when they think the best timing would be and bring that to that meeting, is my suggestion.
Yeah, and we will, we talked to each company to see what their thoughts were, and of course, they're open to follow our schedule and needs, because we know our district better. One compromise, that, we could select a firm, we could do a lot of the prep work this spring and this summer in terms of supplying information to the company and then get rolling right away in September, like Jim or Mr. Bryan suggested. And perhaps we could be done by Christmas.
Bring a recommendation back to the next meeting. We don't have any, we can't make it.
Right.
I just suggested we start.
Yeah, oh yeah, of
I
course.
didn't say we have.
Right.
Oh, yes, sorry.
I'm open to whatever the recommendation will come forward with admin's kind of, this is what we'd like to see. This is where we're confused. This is where we'd like clarification. In doubling back, we had this done with a special education. And do we revisit it? Have we revisited those recommendations? Did we follow through with those recommendations? I don't want this to become this is what this firm said. And, because we spent what, 60,000?
I can't remember the cost, but I think it's a valid point. That's an incredibly important data point that should be reviewed and fed into this planning process.
Right. So I don't want this to become that, and I also want us to revisit, because as I was thinking about it, I'm like, we just did this with special education. I don't know if the new board members have gotten up to date on what was recommended, or if we've had kind of this is what we've done from that a year later. These are our results, so, and have that part of it. So like I said, whatever the admin team recommends for you, I'm open to today or tomorrow, whatever, but I just want that to be part of the process.
I think we can get together as a group and have a recommendation, hopefully on April 18th, unless something comes up, then it'd be the first meeting in May. So we'll make that happen.
All right, so then, if there's something else about that, we're up to finance. So, Ms. Paradis gets to join us at the front.
Good evening. In the interest of time, I am not going to go over every report I provided. I do want to highlight a couple of them. Just give me a second here. I'm going to share my screen so you can see which reports I am talking about. All right. The treasurer's report and the budget report were pretty standard monthly reports. So I'll just start there and ask if there are any questions on the treasurer's report or the budget report for February.
Can you give us a page number?
I cannot, because I don't print the whole packet like
I know,
that.
It starts on 37. That's the start of the finance section.
We're going all the way to the beginning.
That's the budget. Yeah, I'm just going to start
Okay,
at the
you're gonna
beginning in the
start at the
order they're
beginning.
going, and I'm just going to say, are there any questions on this one instead of going through the whole report?
Okay, I'm here.
Are there any questions on the February month-end reports, financial reports? All right. One of the things I want to highlight is the enrollment. So whatever page it is, it has the yellow font or yellow background. You can see we did lose 30 students from February to March. 15 of these went to Five Rivers Online. 5 went into care and treatment programs. 2 moved out of district, and 3 moved out of the state. So that is where that is. The rest are open enrollments out.
Say that wasn't 30.
That wasn't 30, I've put in your packet some trends on open enrollment in and open enrollment out. Unfortunately, Forecast 5 does not have the 2021 Mars data loaded yet. So this is 1.5 years old data at this point. So I don't know if it's worth it to discuss it. or maybe wait another month till MDE releases the data to them and we can have conversations with more current data.
Is that when you think it would be?
I hope so. I asked them the question when I ran these reports. I have not gotten an answer yet.
You're thinking May?
I'm thinking May, maybe June, depending on timing.
Question on the enrollment report. We'll continue to decline from our start of September by 100 students.
Mm-hmm.
But your projected end of the year projected ADM is 89, 99, 91 higher. 25, 39.4, or 24, 48.
That is what the model is projecting right now. What I am projecting for end of year is 25, 38. So yes.
Yeah, I said 25, 39 it says right.
Yeah, that's what the model's projecting.
How can you project 90 more students that we currently have enrolled?
So if you look at that March line with the 24, 48, that is how many students we are serving in our buildings.
Correct.
For aid, we get to add in all of our tuition out kids, which is a couple lines below that. Currently, we have 150 students tuition out. So, and that makes up the difference.
That cost is, to us, is not as great as the cost per student on the 24, 48, which we
Correct.
should be, my eyes, we should be factoring in the 24, 48 or that number as what students in our buildings that we have to instruct. So.
Yeah, it is just the revenue factor has one more component. Mm-hmm.
It's the revenue part. I'm just saying our costs are based upon the 24, 48, even though we have the extra 90 projected coming in
Mm-hmm.
per student.
The other information, no, okay. The other information I was asked to bring back was the 2022 budget reduction tracking, which has not changed much in recent months.
It looks like page 54 of our packet.
Are there any questions on that?
We have the projections there, but are we following it?
Yes.
Or are we deviating from it? We're still gonna look at the 2.3 million projected, estimated savings?
Yes.
Okay.
My big topic for tonight was the budget planning for 22-23 and how that is going. So I am going to move this to slideshow so we can see this a little bigger.
That's on page 58.
So here's the timeline we typically follow. Now the 2021, 2022, those are just happen to be the years this year. But in November, we look at enrollment projections. This year we looked at them in the finance committee. I'm thinking next year we'll be looking at them in a workshop setting like this. We decide kind of where we're comfortable on enrollment projections for the next fiscal year. And if we're going to revise the enrollment projections for the current fiscal year for the revised budget. So then in February, we approved the revised budget and we updated our 5-year projections. With that 5-year projection, we get a projection amount on what our budget deficit or gain is going to be for the next fiscal year. In that 5-year projection, our budget deficit for next year was $1.4 million. And then we need to make decisions on how we're going to fund that. Are we going to make reductions? Are we going to use fund balance? That's the next conversation we're going to be having here in April. And then in June, by June 30th, we need to adopt the proposed budget for next school year. So that's kind of the timeline we're on right now. So here are the enrollment projections for the next 5 fiscal years. We update these every year based on new information that comes in. Things change demographically, which can really shift these. We have the local housing market can affect these. The local labor force can affect these. Families moving in, out, all over. So that's why we update these every year, and we're not going to do this once and be done for 5 years. We need to take into account all those shifts. So it's looking like for revenue projections, we will have 2,500 students next year. So that would include, again, like Jim pointed out on my report, the kids we are tuitioning out to other programs, including Five Rivers Online, including Pathways, including Tower View, including the Setting for Reach program at River Bluff. Come on, next slide. So this is just a graphical representation of that same 5-year data. Some people are more visual in a bar graph than a spreadsheet.
Just enrollment, the 2,500 is the total enrollment we're talking, including the kids that
Are tuitioned out, correct.
Well, that number's, okay, lower than what we thought.
Yes. So this is the 5-year budget projection you guys saw with the revised budget in February. It shows our $1.4 million deficit there in fiscal year 23. And if we do nothing to correct it, what the deficit would be ongoing. Again, in graphical form. This isn't necessarily showing our deficit, but it's showing trends in revenue and expenses. The biggest thing is our state aid is not growing much because even with 2% on the formula, our enrollment is declining. So we're pretty much stable by way of revenue, but you can see our salary and benefit expense is climbing and our other expenses is pretty stable. So here are the planning assumptions we went into with it. Enrollment of 2,541, a budget shortfall of 1.4 million. We're moving to grade level centers for next year, and we're going to do 2-tier busing. So those are the assumptions I know right now. Doing that, we went into class size targets. So these were approved at a school board meeting years ago, because these are the class size targets I've worked with as long as I've been business manager here. Is 23 for kindergarten, 24 for grades 1 through 3, 25 for grade 4, 27 at grade 5, and then 29 for grade 6 through 12. If we were to make adjustments for our class size targets, so the FY22, those are the number of sections of that grade level we have right now. So I don't have grade levels on here, it got cut off, but so the top line is kindergarten. We currently have 9 sections of kindergarten. Using our kindergarten projection for next year, we would need to reduce 1.5 FTE, and then we would have class sizes around 23.
And by the way, when we talk about targets, think of an actual target, and then we would hire the number of teachers to get closest to the target. So it's not a cap.
Right.
You know, it's whatever, however many teachers would lead to the closest number. It might be a little higher, it might be a little lower, whichever's closest.
So in the elementary grades, this would be your standard classroom teacher, right? Not your specials teachers, but specials kind of play into this a little bit, because if you only have X sections of kindergarten, you only need X periods of specials for that, for kindergartners. At the high school level, it includes both core teachers and electives, because those kids will be in one period or another, or in one class or another in a certain period. So looking at that, if we use decimals, we could reduce 9.64 FTE and still be within our class size targets.
But because it's decimals, that's like half of a 3rd grade teacher and half of a
Right.
Unless we're combining classrooms, it's not quite.
Right. We're not going to do partial FTE reductions unless it's like an elective something where you might be 0.8 in this building and we're going to shift you over here to cover this. Yeah. So here is our proposed budget reconciliation plan. We've worked on this with the principals and other administrative staff and informed them. They've given feedback. So we could reduce 5 K-4 teachers to align with class size targets, 1 5th through 7th grade teacher to align with class size targets, 3 Red Wing High School teachers to align with class size targets, and we had 3 general education assistants at Twin Bluff Elementary when it was running as an elementary. When it ran as a middle school, we typically did not have general education assistants there. So that was something that was moved there while it was an elementary. This would have an estimated savings of $855,000. So for new or continuing revenue, we would have ESSER 3 funds that were allocated for a second PBIS coach and a general ed high school social worker that were allocated for second semester that were never hired. So we're going to move those funds into next year along with some other funds that are going to be left over in ESSER, and we can fund those 2 positions for the entirety of next year without having to reduce them. We also applied for some achievement and integration funds that'll help us fund the REACH program here at the high school. So that new revenue, those 2 totals combined would be $340,000 worth of new revenue. So we have cost savings of $855,000, new revenue of $340,000 for a total of almost 1.2 million. Our projected shortfall was 1.4 million. And so we're proposing we use $218,000 worth of general fund unassigned fund balance to cover the difference right now. This would leave our ending fiscal year 23 unassigned fund balance to be estimated around 5.2 million or 13.87%. There are also multiple proposals in the legislature for additional funds for schools that might help us cover that 218,000. In the governor's proposal, he proposed an additional 2% on the general education formula. So just using that as a, just to let you know what that looks like for Red Wing, is $383,000 in additional revenue.
I'll just say, I like the idea that hopefully that the legislature will figure out additional funding. We were pretty clear to our legislators last time. I'm at this point opposed to using our fund balance to balance our books. That's not the way to do it. That is either you find more revenue or you find cuts. So you don't balance your books by sticking your savings accounts into running the operation because you never get them back. Gone, they just keep growing. That number gets bigger and bigger. So,
any other thoughts?
I appreciate the big bold print and the few bullets on the page. Thank you. Because that helps me process slower to take in this information. And I always say, what's the fund balance for if not to just use it a little bit here and there? But I might disagree with Jim on, you know, I really want the new couch, not the for sale couch. You know, that's just maybe how we see the world differently. So I'm not opposed to just dipping into the fund balance for a smidge, even though I know smidges add up. I'm not opposed to that balanced budget.
And we need to have the budget figured out by, you said June 30th, and we don't know what the legislature does until the end of May.
Correct. So we're going to have to make some assumptions on what the legislature is going to do.
we should know by our first meeting in June, the legislature's going to do, unless they go into overtime.
Right. But if we want things figured out before they're done, we have to just guess.
If we're going to,
We're going to prove it in June. So.
yeah, we'll approve the budget in June, but if we're going to make reductions,
Right.
we should do that ahead of time and give staff ample time to prepare.
In the reverse, for example,
Right.
The plan is to hire an assistant principal for the high school because Mr. Chose submitted his letter of resignation effective on June 30th. But I don't want to post that yet until I know that right, kind of coalesced on a plan. So it's not only, making budget cuts, it's also
Making hiring
deciding if we're gonna
decisions.
hire particular positions. And, we aren't looking for a decision tonight.
Right.
Yeah, we were
wanna
just
get some feedback.
feedback and,
Things have changed. Make up here for the next calendar year, school year, so we should have that discussion.
So as I was looking back on, if we dip in a little here and a little there into our fund balance, you had that in there, right? On the first, I'm trying to go back now and look at where you had that. I think it was in the first attachment. Because with the declining enrollment and the higher expenses that we have, we're going to continually see more and more of a gap every single year. And dipping into our fund balance is maybe not the long-term solution to this problem. I mean, I know there's only so many things that we can do because we need more money, but we will deplete our fund balance at some point.
at some point, if we keep dipping into it, yes. We'll have to keep making staffing adjustments and other adjustments as we go. This page I have up right now assumes everything comes out of fund balance, the whole 1.4 million. And if we just kept doing nothing, yes, it would be depleted by 2025.
By 21.
25.
Okay.
So it sounds like we've got a really great big fund balance, but honestly, it's there to protect us. And I've always been very, very protective of that balance. And there's a reason why. And this is exactly the conversation that is why I've been so worried about dipping into that fund balance, because it won't take long for that to become very depleted if we can't figure out different ways to balance our budget. And it's, if we dip into the fund balance for next year, that'll balance our books, but it's a Band-Aid and it's not a long-term solution to the big problem that we have here. This makes me so sad because these numbers are people, and I'm glad that we're having an early conversation so that we can prepare people, but this makes me very sad. Our kids deserve as many teachers here in our buildings as we possibly can, and I know we all around this table have that as our top priority. I know that, but that hurts a lot to see this, I have to say, and I'm struggling a little bit, but I also know that long-term solvency isn't going to be made by dipping into our reserves, because that can't happen if we want to be a solvent, if we want to have a strong solvent budget in front of us moving forward.
Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate the information that we have at this point, and I know you'll continue working on trying to balance our budget for the upcoming year with contingency plans. I would assume the legislature does this or that. Our legislature, I said again, it's our legislature, as much as some people want to say they did this, they did that. There are elected people that allocate money towards us and other districts. The one thing of concern in here, and I know you mentioned we'll have more information, is our enrollment in and enrollment out. And going back, this is about 2020, I believe it is. If I just did some rough numbers in my head, somewhere between 8 and 9% of our students are enrolled out of our district besides Goodyear County Ed District. And we have about 1%, a little over 1% coming back in from other districts to us. And that's a huge number. Enrollment, and it may be better when we get another year, because I had 337, I think, and 150 were 115 were Ed District or whatever. So don't quote me on those numbers, but it's a big difference, and it's been something that's been brought up every year, and it just needs to stay in the back of our mind. What can we do to keep our students in our district? If we feel that's important to us. If not, if we can balance our books and run on a lot less kids, that's the other way we may have to go. We've been doing it, but if we feel enrollment is the issue, then we need to work on that enrollment and find ways to bring people in here to partake in our programs in our district. And Yeah, I better not go where I want to go with that. But I do want to see, I feel that people are using our programs in our district, they should be enrolled in our district. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I do have a comment, and I know we're running way late on this, so if we could put it on our agenda for another time, maybe brainstorming or talking about some solutions to that, what our.
But I want to see the rest of the data a year later.
Yeah,
This
but
is
what else
data.
can we do customer service wise? What can we do to reach out to our families? And we've had this conversation many times, but I think we keep talking about it, nothing is really getting done, or we're not really moving the dial on that. But I think we could do way better as a district on reaching out to the kids who've left. And what else can we do? So if we could just have that as a topic at another time.
Well, just to piggyback on it quick, it's a statewide, nationwide issue,
Right.
right? Every district has got declining enrollment, and that's a birth rate issue. Not as many babies were born. And so we're not going to solve, the social crisis of the decade. With more time, we could maybe get a little bit more creative on how we reach out to people, or why people are leaving, or I'm not going to say that we've exhausted every option in terms of what more we could do, but what is the $218,000? What's the percentage of, what does that look like in a percent? I'm not a math head, but is it like 0.004%? Is it 0.2%? Is it
Jackie calculating it.
I know, right? Like, I wouldn't even know what buttons to push on the.
About 22 students too. 21 to 22 students at 10,000 a student.
That's the 0.05%,
Like,
0.06.
Say that?
I totally said that.
Who told you to say
That's a guess, just like I did on my ACTs. But
I'll just piggyback on that then. Well, there's more opportunities for education now than there were 5, 10, 15 years ago too. So that, when the pool is spread out, you have more opportunities. I think we need to have this conversation tied to our budget conversation too, as we go forward.
So we can add that and talk about it more in depth another time.
Maybe early May. Maybe.
Well, so we don't have anything else assigned for our May 2nd workshop other than our finances, so that could be a good chance to kind of dive into this a little bit more.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the information.
Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, next up we have some human resources topics.
French is here to discuss some HR related issues, but before, you can sit down, please. There is one issue that's probably more urgent than others, and that has to do with the 5RO or 5 Rivers Online Purchase Services. And so the issue came up because 5RO posted for a position, a classroom teaching position. One of our highly liked and respected teachers was selected and would like to work in 5RO next year. And so the question for the board to consider is whether we would allow the teacher to stay on the Red Wing contract, and that we would contract those services to 5RO. So that's the issue. Alternatively, GCD could hire a teacher using their contract, and then the teacher selected could choose to be part of the GCD contract. Or perhaps GCD could go a different direction in terms of what teacher to hire. And the background information sheet provides some examples of our current and or past purchases services. between GCD and Red Wing Public Schools. So you can see that some of our part-time Red Wing teachers may or may not teach additional classes at River Bluff. And so we've done that in the past. Some Red Wing teachers teach 5-hour classes as overloads. And so they currently stay on our contract, but GCD reimburses us for the overload that those teachers would have. All or nearly all of our the Tower View teachers are currently employed by Red Wing. There might be 1 or 2 examples of teachers hired through GCD, but most or all of them are hired through Red Wing. And then some of our Red Wing special education teachers are contracted with GCD. So once again, those teachers are on our contract, but they essentially work for GCD. GCD sometimes they're providing just services to us, but I think most of the time they're providing services to all member districts, but we get reimbursed for that. So we do have some past practice. I shouldn't use the word past practice. This is not really a contractual issue or grievable issue, but we do have numerous teachers who are still under our contract, but they work with GCD. So the question is, do we want to extend that to the online school sponsored through GCD? That's the question at hand. And I really need feedback or some sort of direction. This is a big issue, not only for 5RO, but the teachers involved, as well as the school district.
Ms. Tower, your first step.
Why is it an issue today, but it wasn't an issue the last time we hired for Howard?
Yeah, we've had the teaching contracts for Tower View teachers for decades. And so we've been replacing those teachers, after, someone resigns or retires. So we've been hiring them and, they're still working at Tower View. So we've kind of followed that. This is different, because it's 5RO. And I know that's been discussed here at the board table in terms of how we interact with 5RO. And so I'm just looking for direction. I guess another kind of related issue is that there have been some discussions, I don't know if it's been at the board level, but I think it has been actually, about, whether, Tower View teachers should follow a GCD contract or not, because the students are actually part of GCD. And so there's some questions about, supervisory responsibilities, how clean it is in terms of having students who are part of GCD, but our teachers are providing services, those kinds of things. And so I think I think we need to move in one direction, or at least have a plan as far as if we want to make a change in the future, what that would look like.
Mr. Bryant?
Thank you. So Tower View teachers are under the teacher's contract,
Red Wing teachers contract.
so they have seniority rights, just like as if they're in the building, one of those school buildings that we have.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Any other teachers or staff, other than the special ed ones you talk about, do the same type of thing that you're talking about here in the schools? You said the special ed instructors are over there and they're reimbursing us.
Or some special ed teachers.
But they're over there doing the same thing that this one would be doing.
I think the reverse, that special ed teachers who are employees of GCED are in the Red Wing School building.
Goes both ways.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have some GCED hired teachers who provide services in Red Wing, and then we also have some Red Wing teachers who provide services to GCED. So doing so with the 5RO teacher would be the same or very similar as that arrangement, or the Tower View arrangement. It would be consistent with that. However, if the board, wants to make a change, like with the Tower View teachers, then now's the time to say no to the 5RO arrangement, because we'd be going in the opposite direction.
So, I'm just trying to understand you here. So there's special ed teachers or GCED that are Redwood High School teachers on the seniority list, on the base day of study, on the same type of thing here, collective bargaining, retirement insurance, all that. So there's already somebody doing this, but we don't want to do it for this one. So I'm just kind of trying to understand, if there is an issue or something that we need to look at and address, we should look at it and address it down the road. Not just suddenly now decide that we want to do something because this came up. So there's something that we need to work out. Let's get that done down the road. But I'm a big fair and consistency person.
We have,
So
Sherry, did you have something?
let me finish, please.
Sorry, Mr. Ryan.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we have everything out here as we go forward. This is one issue that was brought to us tonight. So I don't know what the contract, I think I've looked at the contract and all that. There's time frames on there and when somebody has to submit something and this and that. So I'm in favor of looking down the road, trying to get something more fair, get something wrapped up, but just kind of like suddenly we're going to do it now for this particular case. This doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah. And by the way, one advantage to purchase services is that we could end them in any year. Of course, there are consequences of that, and I'm not suggesting we should do that. But for example, we could say yes this year and then no next year. They would still be part of our seniority list. They'd have some bumping rights over anyone that we might hire. But we can do that. So we still have flexibility in the future. Even if we said yes to this, we have flexibility in the future. Is that fair to say?
It is. I'll just give you some brief history. We've been doing purchase of service between the ed district and the member districts for about 20 years. So we're kind of used to people being on multiple contracts and weighing through that we found ways to do that. We currently have 7 Red Wing teachers that are on a purchase of service with the ed district. And those 7 have been on there for at least 4 years, full time. So 4 years ago, the leaf senior came on, so the last 4 years. A couple of the teachers we currently do a purchase of service for have been in that situation for 19 years. So this is a long-standing relationship, and it does go both ways. We tend to hire itinerants for our districts, so your speech language, occupational therapy, school psych, but there are positions like deaf hard of hearing, for instance. You don't need an entire deaf hard of hearing teacher. When the ed district teacher retired back in 2006, we pulled that person over to help cover the whole county. And so that's why it's there. It's that cooperative arrangement so that when we have a good person and one district can't fill an FTE, that's one benefit of that. But it also gives teachers a chance during their career to try something different, because sometimes you need that kind of a change. And so I think it's been very beneficial to both the staff and the students. One last thing, I know that in the documents that Mr. Anderson provided for you, there's the mention of some retiree benefits. So let's take the 19-year person that's been a purchase of service. When that person retires on the Red Wing contract, GCD will be responsible for that percentage of the years for the benefit. So it doesn't come back to you and you have to pay 100% of that retirement. If they were with you on your contract for 20 years, we're responsible for 19 years worth of that, and you're responsible for 1 year worth. I know Jackie could have said that better than me, but I hope you understood that.
Ms. Johnson, is that true for severance as well as retiree
Yes,
health insurance?
that is correct. And it was Hildy that did that study for us. So we had that situation with Ron Allen. He was a purchase of service for us. So that's how far back we've been doing this.
And if there aren't any objections to doing the purchase of services for a 5RO teacher, then I'll just make the arrangements to do that. But before I kind of open that door, I wanted to present it to the board to see if there's some different opinions. And so really, you know, we don't have to decide anything. I'm just looking for direction.
It is in the teacher contract. So it's shared staff assignments due to shared agreements with other districts. And so a tenured teacher that we were looking at would stay on the contract they were on versus.
I'll just follow up on my.
Yeah.
Jump in here. Scott, and I'll just thinking numbers here, because I got numbers always in my head here. It's gotta be an auditing, challenge, challenge to keep it all straight.
We have a new online calendar system
That's good.
that
So I'm
has
just saying-
solved that.
I didn't say nightmare, I said challenge, somebody else said that. But, okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to put it all in perspective, and I'm sure I'll mess it up a little bit, but this whole system is difficult. But if I understand it right, Tower View, we supply the teachers, they're part of our bargaining unit. If there's a vacancy, it's posted, and our teachers have the opportunity to apply for that position. Now, this ed district position apparently is something they want to hire them just to take and use it. And to me, in order for the ed district to use one of our teachers to fill in here, we should have made an opening and allow everything to follow through. This is my thinking, and post it that it's available, and then take applicants for the position within our workforce first before.
Arlen, that's an excellent question.
The next thing is, we got precedent that I'm seeing, and we may have full-time, but generally speaking, it's part-time people in each district back and forth. There might be four, I'm probably speaking wrong, but I'm looking at two practices with Five Rivers Online. One is the principal was hired by the ed district, and as far as I know, is on the ed district's payroll. And the other is a director of special education for Five Rivers Online, I believe is also on that. And we let them out of their contracts here or whatever. And we gave them I'm not trying to think the right term, a piece of paper, I'm just gonna say, it's not paper now, an agreement that they have the right to come back to our district 1 or 2 years later, or whatever it is, for a time span, if they want to come back to our district. They went to Five Rivers Online as a full-time employee, but they had that opportunity to come back to us afterwards. But if they were full-time, to my knowledge, they all were hired under Green County Ed District.
Extended leave of absence, I think is what.
Extended leave of absence, right, but it was for a team, I mean, it recognized the need there, but instead of, to me, I can't justify in my mind somebody going there without it being posted first as compared to Tower View. I'm not saying I agree with the whole Tower View situation, I'm not making a judgment one way or another, I'm just trying to look at what I've seen take place so far, and this seems different.
So if I can respond, excellent questions. Last fall, after enrollment in 5RO was trending up, we talked in our superintendent's council about how we would fill positions both in the current year and going forward. And we talked about when we posted, because 5RO is not, it's not GCED, it's the joint powers. So all of the districts, all of the staff are internal candidates. The Cannon Falls staff, the Red Wing staff, the Zimbrota, the GCD, they're all internal staff. And so just for 5RO. So a 5RO position is posted, it's posted internally to all 7 of those entities. They're all considered internal applicants. The superintendent said, yep, we'll go ahead and do that. And we didn't actually take a motion on it, but that's kind of how we decided to move forward. That's how we ended up. So just to answer a little bit about the posting. So when the position was posted, it was posted to all the districts as an internal posting.
I do think getting to Mr. Harris's point, we should, or I should communicate with Kirby Hansen and at least come to an MOU or at least an understanding of how that could work. Because I think that could be problematic if, you know, we did follow our own internal transfer procedures. Maybe yes, maybe no. You know, but I think we could work with Kirby Hansen to kind of iron that out. So I think we can do exactly what you said and still follow our own contract.
As far as the coordinator and the principal, both of them went from teaching positions into administrative positions. And so there wasn't an option to keep them on a teacher contract. And our administrative agreement is not a union agreement. So they took a leave of absence from their teaching position to, I suppose, try out the administrative position. So that would be one difference.
Another issue that I think is important has to do with non-tenured teacher.
Mhm.
We already have this issue with Tower View, but it's something we're gonna have to work out because I'm not sure if we want to tenure a teacher when our own administrators are not evaluating the teacher during the probationary period. So that's something I don't think we've talked about, but you know,
We do have processes in place for evaluations and how evaluations are completed, but not that particularly. And Tower View positions, the next time one comes open, we'll just post it. And so.
Yeah, I just want to be sure that we aren't committing ourselves to a tenured position that would bump somebody that we've hired directly. It's a non-issue in this case, and so I just wanted to bring that up, and then we'll have to revisit that.
Any other questions?
Jennifer? I was just going to say that based on what we've done before, it sounds like this has been successful, positive for both students and staff. And so I'm all for continuing that with 5RO, with the idea in mind that there are, as Kirsten has said, other things that we need to probably discuss in the future to make sure that policies are in place so that it works smoothly, continues to work smoothly as it seems that it has. I was just wondering if any of the other districts in the joint powers have had a similar situation where you have hired from their teachers and they are currently on that contract.
Yes, I have two right now from Mazeppa, for instance.
And by the way, I know we've spent 10 minutes on this at least. One of the concerns I had a month ago had to do with, you know, we can't find enough English teachers. And so the question came to me, should we reassign the Tower View English teacher back into the high school? I'm not saying that we should or shouldn't, but that was a big issue because we need to find enough quality candidates. I did talk to Mr. Nemenich about finding someone to replace the position that would be vacated here. And he thought that if we could post it now, that we'd have a really good chance as far as finding somebody.
And not only did Kirsten talk to him, we both went back and talked to George because we want to make sure that we're working in collaboration with the administrators.
I think I have direction unless there's some more questions or comments.
Ms. Howard, you're still in the queue, you
Yeah. I appreciate you bringing this forward, Karsten, because I can see where it could get aggressive had some people not understood the full context. I think moving forward, another thing to look at is on the Red Wing contract, when people work in different spaces outside of our schools, does their school day look the same as teachers in our buildings? And I think that's where a lot of angst kind of comes from in terms of, well, they get to do this and they get that. Why wouldn't I want to do that at some point? But here's the rub. When you say good, this person's a great teacher, they're highly respected, it's almost penalizing that person for accomplishments when they want to look at things outside of their accomplishments. That's what really rubbed me the wrong way, was the phrasing around if they were a bad teacher, would you have just let them go? Right? Do you know what I'm saying?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so I think we have to be really careful in how we phrase things we want to discuss. Because I'm not so sure, had it been a teacher that really struggles, we would have had the same conversation. I'm assuming, but I could be wrong. But I'm not so sure you'd say, oh, it's stuff. But you know what, we don't want to.
Point well taken, and kind of what could happen would be, what if I'm silent about the quality of a teacher? You know, then there could be assumptions that, oh, well, this person isn't highly liked or respected. So it's kind of exactly what you're saying.
But we have to be silent in a lot of situations, which we don't want to necessarily have to be, and we have to. So I think it's just really important that we're very careful about these things on how we converse with them at this level. And I think it's something that should definitely be addressed with the union in terms of teachers and what that looks like for the teachers moving forward. And they have a conversation before it comes to us.
I think we're on the same page, and I appreciate Ms. Johnson for coming and for the discussion. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm not 100% sure that we should have this discussion before we go back to Mr. Hanson and have a discussion as to what we want to do for future topics, not come back. Because we already heard two people teaching, one in administration over there, so that's totally separate. So I think we need to have if you want to change it, not counting this time, but going forward from here afterwards, if we want to change it, we should have that discussion, what we'd like to see the parameters, and then go back. That's my thinking. Because this is really, it's a board issue that you brought it here, so. I'm in favor.
We'll have to take in mind the wording in the contract, the teacher
Right, you
contract.
got to take the contract, and then if the contract doesn't cover it, then the policy comes in.
Or likely to go through the negotiations team.
I'm saying, I think we as a board need to have a discussion about it. I'm not saying Mr. Hanson shouldn't be involved in it down the road, but right now, I think it's a board conversation.
What I was gonna add to the conversation is it feels like a really kind of complicated, and as I'm listening to everybody describing practices and past practices, and is this all written down somewhere about our policies and procedures, and can we go back to that? I mean, are we following something that has been written or not?
Yeah, it's in the teacher contract.
Right, so I think that, right, going back to your point in the beginning, why is this even an issue then? Because it is already written down, there's already a policy, there's already procedure. Follow that, that's why we have them there.
Yes, and the only thing though is that this is a nuance to that.
Well, it's
not
an
directly-
additional program
Right.
that,
Mhm.
and we've all been working under the assumption that 5RO is going to that same kind of policy, working under that same policy and procedure. It just hasn't been spelled out, or that's not written somewhere in stone, but we're all operating under that assumption. Is that right?
Essentially, yes.
So then we can't change the rules in midstream. We
Right.
can't change the policies and the procedures just because we're like, oh, well, we did it for these 4 programs, but now we've got a new program and we're gonna change the rules and do things differently. That doesn't make sense.
But I think the framework is essentially there.
Okay.
But this is one example because GCD is posting the position. And one of our teachers, was selected for that, but did not go through the internal transfer process internally.
Okay,
And so that may be a non-issue. I mean, Mr. Hanson might say, no problem. Or we may need to talk about what that looks like. So the framework is essentially there, but this is slightly different. And it hasn't been imagined before, like
Sure.
it's our view. It's kind of. just
In
kind of
this
coming out.
case, the teacher that applied is most likely most senior. Certainly the people that applied. So I think by default, we did follow both yours and the GCD contract, but we can look at that.
I think if we went through the process according to our contract, I think there's a very good chance that same teacher would be hired. But I'm imagining, the next time, that we go through a similar process, that might not be the case. So let's be proactive and kind of get it down in writing.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So Ms. Grant,
I'm back. Sit. I'm kidding.
Yeah. It's an inside joke.
Hi, everybody. I just want to clarify that this is not regarding HR issues. I don't know that I like that word. It has the connotation of stuff that's negative. And I'm really proud of the work that's going on in the HR department right now. And there's an attachment in there about just a brief overview of some of the things that are currently going on, what's upcoming. I won't take a lot of your time, but I'm just going to highlight a few. I myself, the Abdo group, if you remember, that did our hiring process, I'm going through a 9-month cohort with them. We talk about wage and hour compliance, benefit management, succession planning. So it's kind of going back to school, which is pretty exciting. Sorry. We've had a huge increase in the number of accommodation meetings. That really has not subsided during COVID. So that's been pretty time consuming along with the FMLA requests. Investigations have been ramping up. I'm more involved in that. So that's taking a large amount of time. Big learning curve, but I'm enjoying that part. I did with Teachers on Call, trying to generate some more subs. I don't know if anybody saw the social media post, but we did kind of a sub information virtual meeting. 7 people indicated interest, and when the time came, it was me and the rep from TOC on the. We tried. We'll try again in August. You know, we keep trying. Probably not the best time of year to try to do that, but we gave it a shot. Next Tuesday, Mike Pagel, myself, and Marcia are attending the MDE job fair at the convention center in Minneapolis. So we're pretty excited to be back in person doing that. We did source a great teacher last time, 2 years ago, out of that. So this year, the goal is 2. And we also signed up to do on-site interviews, which we didn't do the previous time. It was new to us. We hadn't done it before. So this next time we've signed up for on-site interviews. Hopefully we'll have a better idea of what we need on the 12th so that we can move forward with those hires should something come across. We did participate in a virtual career fair for teachers of color. Bunch of us put our work aside and met down at Twin Bluff. And the only people that showed up for that were people looking for sponsorship, which we're not really set up to do. That would take a lot around that. So again, we tried.
What's sponsorship?
They want to be sponsored in the U.S. for work visas.
Okay.
So,
They work in Europe or something.
Yeah.
Asia or something like that. They need sponsorship to come to the US.
yeah,
Okay.
They're not US citizens.
yeah. But we tried. We'll try again. We'll just keep trying different things. The pay equity report was submitted. I've been working on a flexible work arrangement. I'm not particularly fond of remote work policy, if you will. So I've been working on a draft for that, just to accommodate, mostly for us to be accommodated in different locations. A lot of us are in various spaces throughout Red Wing or elsewhere. We really don't have any process in place to speak to what your expectations are when you're not at your usual workplace. So that's coming. We're looking pretty excited. Jackie and I and Holly will probably be working on a time tracking module with Smart ER, which is going to be great to get out of the paper time cards, but that'll be a process. We'll probably roll it out slowly, group by group. Possibility of a benefit portal, and then looking at the organizational chart for the district. So,
Benefit portal.
well, so that you can sign up for your benefits through a portal, a web page And you do it in the comfort of your own home. You have everything laid out for you. It gives you, so there isn't the paper flow and the errors that might happen. It's more, it's a program you log into and it lists your benefits for the upcoming year. And then you pick and choose or waive that option. It gives you kind of a list of what your deductions would be based on those choices. There's information about each tier that you're choosing. Are you familiar with? Yeah, they're really nice, and it would be helpful for Holly and I too, especially for payroll, if we could just transfer data from one place in a file right into Smart ER, but we'll see.
I just do benefits portal. I didn't know that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So it was like the
Yeah.
Alexa telling me what I can do.
Be much more efficient.
Yeah, it's efficient.
User friendly, but there's a cost associated, so.
And there's a lot of work in getting something like that up and running. So we'll see, but there's a lot of good things happening. Does anybody have any questions?
Oh, you're just still in the queue.
Oh, sorry, no,
Okay,
I've raised my hand.
go ahead, Ms. Rock.
Not so much a question, but a comment. Karsten, Phil, and I have had similar conversations because we invited him to the APAC committee one time and we had asked him, how are you getting ethnic staffing here? And he goes, well, I'm just showing up. And me and Phil are just like, you are just showing up. He's like, yes. We both extended ourselves because as ethnic people in the district, we're not a very diverse city or district. Teachers from a more diverse population are not going to want to come be secluded by themselves down here. So it's nice to see a familiar face, knowing that there is diversity down here within our staffing. So I would like to extend that to you as well and your colleagues. Anytime you go to a hiring, what are they called?
A job fair?
Job fair.
Yeah.
I know Phil, he's extended it to other staff too, that we would be more than willing to go with.
Thank you.
on these.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I actually will probably reach out to you about next Tuesday.
Okay.
If you're,
Maybe Ms. Buck and Mr. White.
yeah. Even if you don't want to be there the whole time, just to stop by.
Yep, just to kind of
Yep.
check it out. And
I'll even
kinda-
get you a lunch ticket.
Okay, perfect.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
For the update. Okay. Does anyone have any burning other topics that we should talk about right now? Yes.
Today I attended a 2-hour online meeting with 2 professors at the University of Mankato, understanding the basics of working with students who are Native American. And it was sent to us through our email here at the district. And so as I was looking through it, there were a couple different options, and I chose the one like just understanding, what do you need to know about the history and the laws and why things have, happened the way that they have within the Native American communities. And in my 26 years of education, I've learned a lot, read a lot, taught a lot. This still nailed the basics for me in a way that it hasn't ever. And coming away from that, the 2 professors of, multiple directors and doctors and that kind of thing, they go around and they do these teachings to different universities. They teach classes themselves. And I think it's really beneficial if we as board members try to make an attempt to go to that training. And the 2 hours went by really quick. That's why I was late. It was 3 to 5. And then there's some at night, 6 to 9, or not 9, 6 to 8. But I think it would be really beneficial for the board to look into, if you haven't done this, if you haven't taken a history class recently, if you haven't been looking and Googling, it's our responsibility to know all of our students. And so I'm not lecturing you, I'm just saying, it's through Eventbrite, it was sent to us on our emails through the district. I sent Lisa an email and said, hey, can I go? She's like, yep, you're signed up. I said, great, thanks. That's how simple it was. And I learned a lot as an adult. A lot I wish I would have learned as a child, but I learned a lot. So that's available for all of us.
Oh, and then also I got this through my email, the Goodhue County Historical Society is putting on an exhibit of the residential schools. April 6th, I believe it starts. Don't quote me on that date, but I know it's coming up soon, within the next few days. So if you haven't, or, this is new to a lot of people who are non-Indigenous, I really highly encourage everybody to check it out.
Yeah,
They might get a small insight of what Prairie Island's gone through.
There was a big portion of the training today about the residential schools and how they came, what was the, impetus behind pushing them. And at one point, 50% of Native children were not living with their families. I mean, 50% children across the country. It was just eye-opening and devastating. So, I'm gonna go to the exhibit. I saw the poster at the museum.
Okay. Would you like to make a motion to adjourn the workshop, and we'll take a 5, 10
So moved.
minute recess? Okay, we have a motion to adjourn by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Tift. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, so we are adjourned at 7:11, and let's reconvene at 7:20. 9 minutes.
Hopefully we'll catch up.
All right, it is 7:20 p.m. and I will call to order our regular school board meeting. And we have all 7 school board members attending, as well as Superintendent Carson Anderson. We already did our Pledge of Allegiance, and I don't have a printed picture yet. I forgot my printed out copy of the mission statement, but Ms. Tiff will read it for us.
The mission of the Red Wing Public Schools is to educate and inspire all students as they realize their full potential and become respectful, responsible, and productive citizens.
Thank you. And then I realized Lisa did give me a copy of it, so thank you, Lisa. Okay. Next up is our meeting agenda. I believe we have one change that we are not going to go into closed session. So I would make a motion to remove it from the agenda. Is that how we do that? Or just approve it, the agenda with that? Got it. Okay. Any other changes or amendments, additions to the agenda?
Motion to approve the amended agenda.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the amended agenda by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Rowe. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Okay, so that carries. Thank you. All right. I will draw your attention to our educational plan, which is printed out here at the meeting and is in the packet. Next up, recognitions and upcoming events. Does anybody have any recognitions? Yes, Ms. Buck.
I have a couple, or one recognition and then an upcoming event. I would like to, recognize Lydia Bailey's service, to the district and Prairie Island Indian community. She personally affected my life. She was like a mom, you know, as we were just discussing in our last meeting, it is very hard for our children to come into these doors because we're pre-traumatized by history. Lydia took all of us underneath her, all of our kids were her kids. And I just want to just take a moment to thank Lydia for her service to the district and all the children she touched and the staff too. As of uplifting upcoming events, we will have for the first time an all-girls team, and they're all from Prairie Island, represent Red Wing Public School Districts in the Language Bowl at MIEA this year. So I'm pretty excited, hopefully to have great news with everybody on the results of that Language Bowl, and how very proud I am of the support from our district, of these young ladies, dedication to pick this up and do this for their school and their people. So.
When is that?
I think, well, MIEA is the April 13th, 14th, and 15th, but the Language Bowl itself, it starts at 10 a.m. on the 13th.
And where's it
at? Shakopee.
Mystic Lake.
Mystic Lake.
And that group will be featured on Minnesota Public
Oh,
Radio.
yeah.
How many students?
There's 4. Okay.
Sweet.
Yes.
If I, thank you, Nikki. If I could add a big thank you to Alan Gaylor, his custodial staff, Kevin Johnson, and local firefighters for helping quickly put out the fire in the high school. Without their quick action, I think things could have been a lot worse for the entire building. Mr. Gaylor is going to give an update a little bit later in the meeting, but I wanted to publicly thank all those involved.
Ms. Tower?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Donna Langhans, is that her last name, in the cafeteria. I had a chance to spend some time with her today, and I wanted to see where the fire was, how the cafeteria was impacted, and the fire did not impact the cafeteria. It was the fire extinguisher, which extinguished everything in the cafeteria. They had to throw away food upon food. She said it'll be less than about $10,000 worth of food that they had to throw away, but they had to throw away the food that was in the freezer even, because the white stuff, extinguished stuff, can seep in through the cracks in the freezer. So she and a couple staff people spent, quite a bit of time cleaning everything and then getting rid of. So she was excited that the fire didn't impact them, but then they called back later and said, yeah, but the fire extinguisher basically wiped out the cap, like they had to come in and clean everything on a spring break week. So I just want to give her a shout out and to the cafeteria staff for hanging in there. You're hoping you can go into spring break like Alan, and then all of a sudden you get the call. Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, Ms. Wright.
I'll just say, thank you for the update on that, because we got notified of that quick response by the staff here and all that. And we happened to be driving home, my wife and I, shortly after the call. We needed the whole parking lot, I think, for all the emergency vehicles that were there. I mean, that was great to see. What a great, that's what I'm talking about. They have that agreement for mutual aid through all the other communities around. They all got here, and what Ms. Tower was talking about, that's exactly why the code is where it is, to extinguish fires like this in commercial buildings, schools, and all that. So, yeah, thank you to everybody on that. That was great to get that all taken care of. Causes the fire is one thing, and then the aftermath is the other. So.
Yes, I just have one upcoming event on Thursday from 5 to 7. The speech team has a showcase event at the school here. We don't often get to go see what all they've worked on throughout the season, but they're holding an event so the public can come and see the speeches that day.
Did you say it was here?
Mm-hmm.
In like the classroom or in the hall, or?
I believe they have a couple of classrooms that they're using.
You can go visit.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. So next is our public comment portion. So the guidelines are we expect comments to be limited to 3 minutes per person, and that a representative be selected to speak on behalf of a group of individuals attending the meeting for the same topic. We will listen to the public comments, but may or may not discuss the topic at the meeting. The superintendent and/or board chair may provide a response outlining steps the district has taken or will take to address any concerns raised. And a summary of the district's actions in response to public comment will be provided at a later date as appropriate. We expect that comments remain respectful and appropriate and not identify any current or former students, their families, or staff members by name. We have one person signed in to do public comment here. So Ms. Bertelson, if you would like to come up. You're up.
Good evening. My comment is basically a question. I wanted to know about the volunteer policy. If we have volunteers coming in or if we don't, what was the rationale for that? And I'm representing a variety of groups.
Usually we don't
I know you
respond,
can't.
but
I can't.
can
You
at least
cannot.
explain what the policy is.
Uh-huh.
We do allow volunteers now for specific purposes. And so if you know someone who's interested in helping out one of the schools, they can just contact the building principal.
Okay, but generally the volunteers are not coming in, other than without permission.
Oh yeah, we've always wanted permission in advance.
Okay.
And so, but yes, people can contact the building principal. You know, we don't want to just have numerous people coming to eat with their kids right now in the cafeteria. You know, we are trying to limit that, but if there's a specific purpose, as far as helping a teacher or helping an administrator or something like that, then, we encourage people to contact the principal.
And I understand the public could come in for the speech presentations and that kind of thing. Is there a policy about volunteers? Has it changed?
Yeah, I'm not.
Is it related to COVID? Because I
It
see you
was.
have COVID-related topics on there, and I was wondering.
Yeah, at one time there was. I think it might be better if you and I had a discussion.
Sure.
Perhaps later this week, Thursday or Friday, because I'll be out for another day, but I'll gladly review that with you and answer your questions there.
Okay. And the other part of that question would be, not only what is the rationale for that, and is there actually a policy for that? And would there be something in the future that we could see an end to that, like before the end of the school year? So just keep those things in mind.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that,
Okay.
but we are allowing, volunteers now.
Okay.
So again, they can contact the building principal and kind of go from there, but you and I can have that
Sure,
discussion
sure.
anytime.
Okay, thank you.
Did you receive any other public comment, like an email? I don't think I did. I didn't up until today. Nope.
I did not receive anything by the state of that deadline.
Okay. Got it. All right. So now we have a presentation by AAUW. So Janet will tell us about a project that they have going on for our third graders.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to follow my notes because it's short and I want to respect your time. My name is Janet Brandt, and I'm a member of the local branch of AUW. I'm here to represent that branch. American Association of University Women is what AUW is. And I want to tell you about a project that we initiated with the school district. And over the past few months, I want to express appreciation for the support from the district staff, the third grade teachers, Jess Whitcomb, Emily Seafelt, and Dawn Wettern, especially those three women. United Way and the Red Wing Public Library were our partners with this project, and they've both provided enthusiastic support from the start and donated time and materials, and we are so grateful for their help. AAUW is a national organization founded in 1881, and they have a long history of advocating for education. Our local branch is partnering with United Way to provide a bookshelf at a local laundromat with free books in English and Spanish for children grades K through 5. We chose to build on that program this year with a project to support third graders in the district as they prepare for their first statewide reading literacy test. The percent of Red Wing students who met or exceeded the standards of the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments has declined from 62% in 2017 to 40% in 2021. We all know how challenging the last few years have been for everyone, and we are simply proposing to demonstrate community interest and support for the students, the parents or guardians, and the teachers. Our goal is to just help create some excitement, fun, and engagement around this test event, and to encourage students to feel positive and value their own abilities. Our project was awarded a grant from state AUW as it supports the state's advocacy for education, collaboration, and community involvement. So, without further ado, 180 bags were sewn by 4 women. There's over 50 patterns. It's quite mind-boggling. So I brought just a selection of the.
Did it bring all of them?
What's that?
Did it bring all of them?
Yeah. No, they're in my basement. My basement now smells like crayons. There are crayons. Should tell you all what's in. There's a note for the parents in English and Spanish, and mentioning who the partners are. There's a short story
only 2 pages with a very short multiple choice test. And I was really excited about the coloring sheets that we're including. The library provided these, and these are plants that grow on Barn Bluff. And it came out of that project with Barn Bluff with the master plan, I believe it was around that time. This is probably a lot for a 3rd grader to read, but maybe their parents will help them with it. So it talks about Thoreau and kind of the history of him being the inspiration partly to do this project. But it's called the Kota Coloring Book. So I think there's 7 plants. And there's a library card application. We've included a pencil for them, a snack, a fruit snack, and a fidget, even though the 3rd grade teachers, I don't think were excited about a fidget. Maybe they'll take it home. Yeah, sorry. And a peppermint. So we are delivering these to the community ed on Friday, and they'll be taken to the 3rd grade classroom. So I hope the kids enjoy them and they relax and do their best. That's our simple goal. Any questions?
Thank you, very good.
Yeah.
So, community involvement. Thank you very much.
Yes, we had great partners.
I wish I had those one day.
I know. Wish I could, yeah.
Please extend our thank you to all those.
Oh, yes, you can tell the
Yeah.
love.
Go back to 3rd grade if you want to, Nikki.
Well,
You could probably enroll.
yeah,
There you
life is
go.
probably much better in 3rd grade.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of tough.
yeah, it was fun because they're not all, I think it's fun. I hope they have fun with it because they're not all the same.
Nice, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, COVID-related topics.
Nothing new to report?
Great, any,
I just, if I may,
yes,
last night in the news, emergency hospital bed, COVID patient hospital beds is the lowest since it started in Minnesota. Great news.
That's great news.
all right. Next up, school board reports. So of course, we had our workshop, which covers some of what would have been reports in the past. Negotiations.
Look at they're color coded. Well, for those of you who have a paper copy, they're color coded on which ones we're working on. So that's awesome. And there's a lot happening in the next week or so with some groups. So nothing new there. Trucking along.
Any liaison reports? Missed the equity meeting today.
I did too, because was it a makeup one and I maybe not have,
I went to the wrong link. It was my own fault. I was in my calendar in the wrong month.
I didn't have it in my calendar, so that's how, so
Okay.
I apologize to us. So yeah, I wasn't there either. And for the Native American one, MIE is this week, so.
Yes, Ms. Tower.
I have some news to report from GCED. So bear with me as I go through some notes that I took. One of the big things was just kind of an update on 5RO. In terms of students, there's 370 kids there now. A lot of kids. More in high school than the younger grades. They haven't moved too much, but pretty impressive. And everybody got their postcard in the mail. It hurt my heart a little. It felt like a recruitment thing coming, like, oh, they're gonna leave Red Wing, but then at the same time, if it's like Jim said earlier, there's so many more options for children and families now, and if that's what fits, that's the goal. Is that kids get an education that works for them and for their families. So, yeah, that little postcard was like, ooh. we had a presentation on the special ed recovery services from Marcia, and kind of like the one here, but she had a lot of confidence in the work that the special ed teachers had done with the families during COVID and trying to determine who needed more services because of time missed and who did okay and how that time was going to be recouped for kids. If it was going to be after school, before school, or in the summer. So I was pleased with Marcia's confidence around how she felt that the staff here in Redmond did and took it seriously, because that can't be said for all places. It was, it was a laborious undertaking for a lot of reasons. So, other than that, we talked about bills. Tower View came out and gave a presentation about some of the renovations that they're making out at Tower View for the students. And I asked how many kids that, they had out there. I think it was, 60 or 70 students that are out there. It's always a beautiful place for kids to have, a spot to go to school. Wish we could do it for everybody again, but so there's going to be some nice things happening out there. 65 to 70, 10th through 12th graders. And I think what we're paying in tuition right now is $45,000 a year. Does that sound right?
For Tower View?
Not tuition, but that's what we pay to have students go out there. Is that what the bill is?
Oh, maybe perhaps for the lease itself.
Yeah, the lease itself.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 35 to 45,000.
Okay. It's gonna go up a little bit, FYI, because of the renovations. That's something I think that the board can continue to kind of look at in terms of, I think if we surveyed the students, they'd say they loved it. If we surveyed the staff, is that still the best place for us to be looking at students going or not? And I'm not saying it is or it isn't, but it's just something for us to continue to think about. How long is it a 1-year lease we sign every year? Is it 5 years?
I think it was a 10-year lease that expires in 2 or 3 years. I can't remember for sure, but we made that long-term commitment a while ago.
Yeah. Yeah, and the people that, presented, John Christensen and Stephanie Rogers, were very, complimentary of the students and the teachers and loved the connection and all of those kinds of things. You can always reach out to them if you have any questions. There was something about the Stop It program, and I was hoping we could talk a little bit about that. Is everybody familiar with the Stop It program? The bullying app on students' devices that they can report bullying immediately?
Yeah, we're planning to do that in Red Wing, but we want to give a presentation to the board as far as what the app is like and how it can be used and how it's monitored. So I don't think I've shared that information out yet with board members, and we have not implemented it yet, but we signed up for it. And so we're in the queue to get free funding for a year or two. And we're thinking about implementing that for next year, and so we'll bring it later this spring.
They're going to be doing it 23, 24, it looks like. The question around it was access. Some students have their own cell phone, some don't. Some kids will have a device in which to use it, but you have to have a device in order to report. And you can report bullying as it's occurring, or, things that happen throughout the day or things that happen at home. It's kind of a 24-hour access, like a mini 911 for kids.
Oof.
Yes.
I'm very interested in all the bells and whistles on this, because I can
Pandora's
see
box.
this, I can see this going very, very south without extreme thought put into this.
Which is why I was bringing it up. I think that there's a lot of, but like I said, that's how I saw it. It's like a mini 911, like, she's being mean to me, or my mom yelled at me, or, all those kinds of things. So I know that there's people vetting it, and I know that there's things that are being looked into, but that's the way of the world. You know, reporting in real time, Facebook Live, you know, social media. So it makes sense that the moneymakers out there would want to capitalize on something that could help for safety, but also be a detriment possibly. So it's coming. They have it, or they approved it. Yeah, we talked about the solar garden. And I don't mean to talk slow, but I just feel like I'm exhausted at this point, this point in my life. And then I also did the community ed. I didn't go to the meeting. I wanted to go to the meeting, but I had to sub my English class, so I wasn't able to go to the meeting. One of the things that came out of it, though, was very cool. There's a crossword puzzle in the community ed flyer that if you fill out the crossword puzzle, you get $5 off your next class. And all of the crossword puzzle answers are around all of the programs that they have. So it doesn't have an answer key with it, but sure, you know, that's one of the cool things. So there's a lot of youth enrichment stuff coming out for this summer. Right now, Kids Junction has almost 200 kids signed up for the summer. They'll be doing separate field trips for the older kids. They'll operate out of Sunnyside. The joint, the advisory council represents many parts of the community, nonprofits, seniors, healthcare, and members played a role in getting the word out at the successful 2018. I don't know what that means. Oh, referendum. The community had a lot of, you know, support in getting out the word for the referendum for 2018. And hopefully that can happen for 2022. I think there's some worry around it for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. And how do we get the message out in a positive way, in a way that doesn't make people feel exhausted or spent? And so that was one of the topics at the community ed meeting. If you have any questions, reach out to Dawn or Dawn Weather or Ann, and that's it.
All right. Student School Board will actually meet tomorrow. It's our first meeting. And because we weren't able to have earlier meetings, we're going to have 2 in April and 1 in May. So hopefully we'll have a little bit more coming back from that pretty soon. Any other reports? If not, we are on to administrative.
We could have Mr. Gaylor and Mr. Johnson join us just for a couple of minutes. And while they're coming up to the front here, I do want to give you a quick update about transportation for the charter school, because that was brought up at a recent meeting. Include the MVP memorandum showing that our reimbursement rate for this coming year will be $310 per pupil for providing that transportation service. It's a certain percentage of the general education funding, so it changes from year to year. I did express some concerns with the city as far as the dropping off and picking up of students at the charter school because it's a 1-lane in and out road. And so that, according to Terry Johnson, our bus manager, that could delay things by 5 to 10 minutes at a certain time. So hopefully that can be resolved at some point before we start providing transportation.
Resolved in what way?
Well, hopefully, I don't know, that's up to the charter school to figure out. But, you know, we really don't want our buses to be waiting in line for 5 to 10 minutes because that could impact, you know, our own kids, you know, pick up and drop off times. So, I mean, there's some options as far as, you know, the kids being dropped off at a different spot and then they could walk into the charter school, or perhaps they could widen the road, or, you know, do something like that. But we're hoping that can be resolved.
And you're hoping it's resolved before September?
Definitely.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
So invited Mr. Gaylor here to just briefly discuss the fire and the work that's been done over the last couple weeks.
Thank you, Superintendent Anderson. As you know, we had that fire Wednesday night. Jackie reached out to our insurance company right away. Our adjuster was here on Thursday of that day, and we actually had a fire investigator here on Friday morning to investigate what had happened. Our initial thought was it was a ballast in the light, and that was founded untrue. We did capture the whole event of the start of the fire on cameras within the cafeteria area, which was very interesting to them. And then as we took the fixture down and they looked more into it, as you look at a fluorescent bulb, there's 2 pins on each end of it that you turn, push in, and they lock them in. And that's where the initial fire actually started, is in that plastic piece with the 2 pegs on the fluorescent lighting. The investigators said it is very rare for this to happen, but obviously it can happen. So that's kind of where the investigation was left. The investigation was done Friday afternoon, early. I called him and I said, are you still here? And he says, I've talked to the adjuster and we are not pursuing any further actions to try to find out what the problem was. They were pretty sure what it was. So that's where we are at with that. As you can see now, you really can't see where the fire was. We did do in-house mitigation as we have done before when we had a flood. Our team did a great job. I actually had that night of the fire, we called custodians to see if they would come in and help, and we had 11 people here to come in and help us that evening clean up. As Holly said, a lot of it was 2 fire extinguishers that got blown off prior to them being here, which was a good thing because they knocked it down a little bit. And the other part of that I want to commend them for is calling the fire department back and saying it was an actual fire and that they were updated that yes, it is a working fire. So they got more resources coming and stuff. And the one thing I want to say about that is it probably was a good time it happened, because if it would have happened at an evening where nobody was here, they would have been alerted as our fire panel system alerted them and called them, but it was alerted as just a fire call. So they would have been coming here just thinking, there's probably an alarm. And then they would have had to find out where the fire was as they walked the building or whatever. They'd had to get the keys and get in. So there could have been a substantial time frame there that we got lucky with the crew. They found it right away. As soon as they heard the alarms going, they walked in there and spotted it, and that's when they took action. So I really want to commend our team from the start when they found the fire and the whole week of everything that we did to mitigate and clean up the fire. The only thing we really had to do is have a couple contractors come in and fix some wiring. There was a lot of wiring up in the area that got melted. And then we did the ozoning just because of smoke. And we don't have the tools to do that. So we had Service Master do that. Otherwise, we did a lot of it in-house, which is pretty impressive.
By the way, my understanding is that the night crew that evening had all been employed over the last 4 or 6 months, or they're relatively new.
They are all fairly new. Fairly new.
The fact that they knew where to go, they knew what to do is a testimony to you, as far as your training of our new employees. And to Shonda, who does some of the training, and I'm sure Kevin as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Fire sprinklers didn't go off, right?
There was a fire sprinkler about a foot away from the light, but it was below the light. The fire was above the light, so heat rises. So yeah, we had a sprinkler right there, but it did not activate it.
Those actual fire extinguishers that your people use to put the fire out, that power stuff just goes.
Oh gosh, once he lit it off, in the video, I watched it, the poor kid, they were coughing and.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it was, so.
Well, thank them for us.
I will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then the next item is probably more in Mr. Johnson's realm, unless Mr. wants to add something. But There was a column in the Republican Eagle highlighting our energy program at Redmond Public Schools. So they copied the articles in here, but if you have any questions about the unbelievably good value that our Buildings and Grounds Department does in terms of energy conservation, you have to ask.
I'm ready to answer any of your questions. I love energy, you know that. Right? Yeah, I obviously gave Karsten some of the information here. But I thought was interesting, back in 2010, we were saving, and we had an engineer go through and do this to find out what the numbers were, because I didn't want to do it because it doesn't sound right to my own numbers. So I had an engineer do it back in 2010, and we were, at that point, we were up from 2001 up to 2010, we were saving 219,000 a year in energy, different things that our custodians again did. Yeah, I might have been one that decided let's do this and this, but without, like Alan said, with all of their help and everybody rowing the boat in the same direction, I couldn't make it all happen. So I mean, they really jumped on board and says, yeah, this makes sense. We got to do this, time of day scheduling, fix our dampers, you know, all the little tiny pieces add up. And then just before I retired, I had the same a different engineer do a update again, which the number Karsten had in the paper from 2019. So from 2001 up through 2019, at that point, we were saving 365,000 a year had we done nothing to improve our energy, whether it be motors or frequency drives or low wattage LED, low wattage fluorescent lighting. LED coming up, that could help us a little more, but we'll talk about that later. So, and currently all of our buildings are Energy Star certified. I'm looking to have the engineer do it again. It's an engineer that I just happened to meet doing a project here one year, and we hit it off. We like solar and energy and mechanical stuff, so he'd really love sitting with us at lunch. But his company is nice enough that he works for, allows him to reach back out to the community to help us out and give back, so to speak, because I wouldn't hire an engineer and pay him thousands of dollars just so we could hang the plaque on the wall. To me, that doesn't make sense. But since we're getting it for free, why not? It's something else you can put in your hat and say we're really doing, and something that I'm proud of, because I'm not aware of too many schools that can say every one of their K-12 schools are rated. They've dropped a little bit because of COVID. We're taking in tons of outside air. Sunnyside, I think, is down to 76. You have to have 75 or better to qualify. And our highest building is, I think, 92 or 94. And just ran an average the other day, a district-wide average that B3 benchmarking does. It's where we have, it's the Minnesota energy thing where all public buildings have to enter their data into. Excel just sends it there automatically. So right now we're averaging an 88 if you add up all of our buildings, which 50 is average. So we're in the top 12%, something like that. So that's pretty good. Putting it in numbers, the actual, not the dollars, but the actual usage, to me, that means more than dollars because that's all over the place. Actual usage, energy corrected, is since 2001, again, our energy electrical use is down 29%, and our gas is down 35.5%. So it's big buildings, that's a lot of money, so obviously. So with that, I'll quit. I'll get off my soapbox. I could talk all night on that one. So. But if you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
I wish I did. I don't even know what to ask.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
There's some other items in the administrative report. If you have any questions, feel free either during the meeting or at any time.
Anybody have anything they want to discuss from that? Not, we are on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they would like to pull from the consent agenda?
I would like to note that we did update the consent agenda today to show the resignation of Jay Schultz, effective on June 30th.
Yeah, we should probably have as one of the workshops, what the time frame is once something's posted without changing it, because we really should have a thing set in place by a certain date. And then if anything needs to be changed, it can bring it to the next meeting, because this is not a big deal, I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying, that we shouldn't have to go back
Or at least
on the day of the meeting to see if anything's been changed. So we should have a cutoff date. If it's important enough to be brought up, it should have been brought up earlier. If not, we should wait. That's all I have to say. I'm fine with it today, but I'm thinking we need to have.
Or email us at least if there's a change.
You should still, and that's nice, but it shouldn't be, the thing should be put in bookmarks by a certain date and removed or not added to. So just my thought. Make a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening.
Oh, sorry.
Is there a second? No? Second? Okay, so we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Howard. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And that carries.
It's too late, I was too sleepy.
Okay. Next up, sorry, I have to turn the page. Resolution accepting donations and grants. So we have a number of them, which is wonderful. Do you want to talk about any of them?
Sure, I'd like to thank Beth Flatten, I believe, for a $500 donation to the Emergency Medical Needs Fund, Philip S. Duff Endowment Fund for just over $7,300 for the Red Wing Bird Banding Program in Park Naturalist. That's a program of the Community Education Department. And then finally, the Mayo Clinic Health Systems for a donation of $1,500 for community education and recreation scholarships.
Thank you to all of them. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the resolution.
So moved.
Second. Okay, and because it is a resolution, we will need to do a roll call vote. So we have a motion to approve the resolution accepting donations and grants by Ms. Rose, second by Ms. Tift. Ms. Buck?
Aye.
Ms. Rose?
Aye.
Ms. Tift? Aye. Mr. Dirks?
Aye.
Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Ms. Tower? And chair votes aye, so that carries 7-0. And thank you again to those donors. All right, Mr. Johnson, I think you're back up with our LED lighting. So we had a presentation at our last meeting during our workshop about the LED lighting. And we have a recommendation to approve that project.
All right, do you want to start or should I?
I can say it, doesn't matter. Unless you want to do it all.
I'll talk, you can fill in.
Okay.
So we had some new information come to light on Friday. There are some new rebates coming up through Excel. So we're happy to answer any questions, but we'd like you to actually table the motion until we can go find out more information on the additional rebates and what this could mean with the Department of Ed and timing.
I move to table the motion.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay.
Well, that was quick.
Hope I didn't say too much.
Was there anything you want to add to what I said?
No, I was just gonna let them know that it was
We
just,
can discuss it.
Too late.
Yep.
I was just gonna let you know it was a nice rebate. I mean, it's a big amount.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's worth
Will you be
waiting.
ready to talk about it at the April 18th meeting, or do you think?
We're hoping, the gal we needed to talk to at the Department of Ed was out Friday and we couldn't get a hold of her today.
Cross our fingers.
We'll tentatively add it to April 18th and hope that that works. If not, we will bump it out to the 2nd.
That'd
All right.
be perfect, thank you.
All right. Thank you. So, next up, we have our teacher non-renewals.
Yeah, and at tonight's meeting, we're non-renewing those probationary teachers who have out-of-field placements. And so we need to advertise for positions and then find somebody who is currently licensed in those particular areas. If we're not able to do so, then the same people could apply for another OFP, out-of-field permission. And so this is a formality. They've known this, for the whole year that they would be non-renewed. So you see the list of names there, and we will need a motion to approve the resolutions with those names.
Eight motions?
That's what we've done in the past. I've heard conflicting advice if we have to do each one separately or not. In the past we have, but
We
it's.
did at GCED.
You did?
Each one individually. We did each one individually.
Yeah.
So we just kind of went around the table and everybody took a turn.
I think if you list them all like this, you can just do them all in one motion.
Yeah, that's always been my understanding and preference. I've heard it both ways.
I'll make a motion, I move to approve the resolution relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contracts of the following 8 probationary teachers listed on the page.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Just a question, how many people counted it after I said 8?
Yes.
I just wonder if we need to read the entire motion with the names of the individuals, so, rather than, because there's no reference on the resolution, if anybody looks in the minutes, who they were.
It is in the resolution.
It's in the resolution, but Jim's motion was the following 8 people, not listing them.
I'm old school. I come from a place where we had to do them all individually last week.
I can certainly, if you are okay with a slight amendment to your motion, I can read them out.
That's fine.
Okay. So we have a motion by Mr. Bryant, second by Ms. Rowe, to approve the resolutions relating to the termination and non-renewal of the teaching contracts for the following probationary teachers: Dale Babb, Susan Brandt, Melanie Fox, Emily Kessler, Kennedy Mueller, Gabriella Woods, Ellie Warrington, and Alexa Williams. And because it is a resolution, we have to do a roll call vote. So this time I will start with Ms. Tower. Aye. Mr. Bryant?
Aye.
Mr. Dierks?
All right,
Ms. Tift? Aye. Ms. Rowe?
Aye.
Ms. Buck?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. So that carries 7-0. Okay, next is approval of policy changes. So these 6 policies were ones that we looked over at our last workshop, where the changes to these are very minor, updated references and language spelling out the word Minnesota instead of MN, things like that. Does anyone have any of those policies that they would like to discuss? If not, I'm looking for a motion to approve those policy changes.
So moved.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion by Ms. Tower, second by Ms. Rowe, to approve the policy changes as presented. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And that carries 7-0. All right, and we have removed the portion of our agenda to go into closed session. We will be discussing negotiations and labor strategies at a later date. Okay, next up, upcoming meetings and future topics. So from what is in your board packet, I have added on May 2nd to discuss enrollment and budget adjustments. And then just from conversation, I had added possibly 5RO as a workshop topic to get more understanding of kind of how it all works in our contracts and how those things play out, not just the contracts and the teachers as we talked about in the workshop, but more kind of, I guess, about how things are going or working. I don't know if others have interest in that, or kind of looking at the next school year and what 5RO looks like for that. And then did you want as a workshop topic a time frame of postings and notifications, or did you just want that as a comment to, that we should have a policy for that?
We should probably have a discussion if we need to do a policy.
Okay.
I think Terry talked about that during his presentation.
Sure. So for one of these, we could do policies related to board packets and notifications.
We do like the 16th of May or something with the policies.
Yep.
If that works for everybody.
Yep. And so there are 4, I think, or 5 policies that we should look over and review for that April 18th workshop. I don't remember which policies the numbers are here. I don't remember what they cover off the top of my head anymore, but look at those. Any other things that we need to have added? Future things?
You have the resolution approving response to the non-concurrence. Does that include us discussing it more? Or like what you're actually, it's not just, so it'll kind of go into depth about what we need to be doing, what we haven't been doing, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I'll have a draft response, and then I'm sure there'll be discussion about it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that'll be ready by April 18th, because I'd like to run that through the parent committee first. And we have a little more time than just 2 more weeks.
Right.
So it'd be a better discussion if we can work with them first.
I think whatever we can make it as fruitful as possible and comprehensive and action-based.
Okay. Yes.
I wonder if somewhere in the next 2 months or so, we should have any kind of workshop about the referendum. And what the procedure, what we're looking at doing, how we're going to.
Yeah. And I believe.
There was a timetable, there was something set up in there.
Yes.
But if we could incorporate that so we are all on the same page, understanding it.
Yep, and I believe, I don't know, Ms. Robertson, if you're still on the call, but I believe part of the plan was waiting until after the legislative session ends to kind of see where we were at with that. But so, yes.
Hopefully June 6th.
Maybe we could just have a referendum updated in the board packet with just reiterating the schedule and information, so.
I think we need to have a discussion too.
I like Jim's idea, because that, it's a learning opportunity, perhaps for some of us, our new year here.
Our first time through it.
It doesn't matter, we all need to know about it.
And it takes me a few times to learn things, so.
I want enough white paper.
Yeah, so either
Or
June
bullets.
6th or June 20th, it could be
Sure.
one of those, just depending on that June 6th with finance,
Right.
looking at that next year's budget, that might be a doozy. So maybe we don't want to stack anything more and still be here at 9 o'clock at night.
We're gonna drag it out to the 20th because everybody's getting antsy to be off, or unless we're gonna try to run a meeting, the first meeting in July, we're taking off in between, so if you need something to come back to you, you get it back 2 weeks later if you do it in our first one, but.
What we could do is leave it on June 6th, and then, if we decide to wait, that would be fine.
Sure. Okay.
And for the
Yes.
future, I will be gone June 20th.
Okay.
That's why I put it in the notes.
All right.
We're gonna go to your house to have a party.
I got a new puppy, I bet.
Okay, we need to call this, we need to end this meeting before it gets any more ridiculous. So I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Tower to adjourn, second by me. Oh, Ms. Rowe. All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Just kidding.
6-1, we are adjourned.
No, I said aye. I said
Don't
aye.
do another one.
I said
Oh
aye.
my gosh. We cannot meet after 8 p.m. You all get 2 slap happy.
Third hour.
I am really impressed. We had a lot to talk
55
about.
minutes on this one.